Story 1. My parents left me hungry and alone at 13. When my uncle died, they demanded millions, but the lawyer's secret clause left them with nothing. My parents abandoned me when I was a child, and the only person who stood up was my uncle. Years later, I'd established my own life and business, and I thought I was done with them. It turns out they had different intentions. Let's just say that things got messy. People assume that when parents abandon their child, it will result in a dramatic conflict or a screaming match. For me, it was just another frigid Tuesday morning, and I awoke to an empty apartment and a note on the counter. My life had appeared to be normal up until that point. I was Noah, 13 years old, the only child living with my parents. Dad had a modest used vehicle lot a few blocks away. If you've ever drove past one of those businesses with the inflatable tube man flying around, that was essentially his empire. He pretended to be a business tycoon, yet half of his time was spent gambling in casinos rather than selling vehicles. Mom maintained a daycare from her apartment. She kept it going for a time, but after her depression worsened, parents stopped bringing their children. When a babysitter cancels 3 days in a row, word spreads quickly. At first, we appeared to be a normal family. We had Friday movie evenings with microwave popcorn, camping vacations in this worn-out tent that leaked when it rained, and cinnamon buns on Christmas morning. Nothing flashy, but it was ours. Then cracks started appearing. I'd overhear them arguing late at night. Dad would arrive home later and later, always smelling of old smoke and grease rather than dealership floor polish. Mom spent more time in bed, blinds closed. When I asked about groceries, she told me to make do with cereal or whatever crumbs we had. Dad agreed to turn it over every week. Promises were his preferred currency, as they were inexpensive and simple to spend. I tried to stay consistent. I kept my grades up, cleaned the place without being asked, and didn't complain about wearing the same shoes till the soles were nearly worn through. I assumed if I was perfect enough, they'd notice and pull it together. But kids don't fix grown-ups, as I discovered the hard way. I woke up late on the day everything fell apart. Nobody shook me for school. The apartment was really quiet. Too quiet. Their bedroom door was wide open, which was unusual because Mom always shut it on bad days. I looked inside and half the closet was empty. Drawers were emptied out, leaving socks and other miscellaneous items behind. On the kitchen counter, there was a note written by Mom. Noah, we can't do this anymore. Your Uncle Graham will take care of you. We apologize. 16 words. That was it. I dialed Mom's cell phone and it went straight to voicemail. I tried Dad's number, already disconnected. I scoured the premises for contact information, an address book, or whatever. Nothing. It's just me, the note, and stillness. That night, I stayed up on the couch staring at the phone as if it owed me a response. On day 2, the landlord turned up, hammering on the door about rent. I explained that my parents were gone, but he glanced at me as if he knew better and muttered something about contacting social services. That's when terror struck. On day 3, I gave up and called my school counselor. She did not waste time. The next thing I know, Child Protective Services came knocking. Mr. Barrett, the social worker, spoke in a calm way as if he was trying to keep me from breaking. He called, shuffled documents, and claimed they had found my father's brother, Uncle Graham. Uncle Graham had become somewhat of a ghost name in my family. I'd seen him maybe twice. My parents always referred to him as chilly, stuck up, and too obsessed with his luxury house design business. He resided in another state, never married, and had no children. But guess what? He was the only individual who answered the phone when CPS contacted. When Graham strolled in the next morning, it was as if a whole new planet had entered our bleak apartment. Black vehicle in front, smart suit, silver cufflinks, and slicked back hair. He looked more at home in a boardroom than in my kitchen. He inspected the area, groaned, and said, "Pack what you can carry. The rest can be shipped later." No hugs or sugar-coating, just down to business. And that's how my childhood ended. Quiet, untidy, and accompanied by a stranger who turned out to be the only adult in attendance. Graham did not waste time. While the CPS representative was filling out papers, He stood in the midst of our cramped living room as if he were conducting an inventory check. He didn't seem sad. He did not appear shocked. He just seemed efficient. "One suitcase," he reminded me. "Not two. We're not hauling junk." I recall gazing at my belongings, the pictures on my wall, my video games, and felt a mixture of panic and rage. But I did not argue. Something about the way he said it made it plain there was no space for compromise. I shoved all I could into a faded blue suitcase. Clothes, a few books, and a photograph of me and my mother at the park. I left everything else behind. "CPS would handle it," Graham stated. On the way to his house, he scarcely spoke. Every now and then, he would look in the rearview mirror and inquire if I was hungry or needed to use the restroom. I wasn't sure what I was expecting. Perhaps they are comforting words. Instead, it felt as if I had been drafted into a military program. Orders only, no small talk. When we arrived at his place 3 hours later, I knew house wasn't the correct term. It was a full-blown Victorian home, the kind you'd see in a historical magazine. Tall iron fence, groomed grounds, and stone statues I couldn't identify. I stepped out of the car, still wearing the same hoodie I'd been wearing for days, and felt as if I had arrived on another planet. Graham went in after me, gave the place a quick inspection, and said, "Don't touch the curtains with dirty hands. Breakfast is at 7 a.m. That's all." He then left me standing there. That night I did not cry. I was too wired. Everything felt fleeting. As if I messed up, he'd contact CPS and send me somewhere else. I stayed awake, staring at the carved ceiling, promising myself that I'd follow his instructions until I found out an escape road in case I needed one. The rules came quickly. Shoes off in the house, homework done at a desk rather than on the couch, and 1 hour of piano practice every day. It didn't matter that I had no talent. I broke practically everyone within the first month. Not on purpose half of the time, but simply because I wasn't used to structure. When I walked into the kitchen at 8 o'clock, the stove was cold and he was reading the paper. "Kitchen closes at 7:30, he'd remark, not looking up. No yelling or guilt trips, just penalties. That was the thing about Graham. He did not operate on emotions. He acted more like a boss than an uncle. If my schoolwork wasn't completed, my weekend plans were canceled. If I did not follow through, I would lose my privileges. He never threatened to get rid of me. However, that was the difference. Every punishment has an end point, and once it was finished, life returned to normal. The first break in his steel wall appeared around 2 weeks in. I was in my room staring at an old photo of my parents' wedding day. I didn't hear him enter. He noticed me trying to wipe my tears discreetly. Instead of making a speech, he simply offered me a handkerchief, perched on the edge of the bed, and remained there until I gathered myself together. There is no advice or pity, only presence. Strangely, that was superior to any "I'm sorry" statement. Graham's life revolved around systems. Whitaker Home Collections wasn't just a furniture store. He'd established an entire chain of luxury decor businesses spanning 3 states. He approached everything like business, including me. On weekends, he would drag me to meetings. "Watch how they talk," he'd say quietly. "See who speaks first, who gives in, and who maintains eye contact." I was 14 years old and taught negotiation skills before I could even complete algebra. But don't get me wrong, he was strict as hell. I was grounded for not polishing my shoes before school. He once made me redo an essay 3 times because I wrote cool instead of effective. And if I rolled my eyes, he'd raise an eyebrow and remark, "Be careful, Noah. The world will not bend just because you're irritated." But there was something solid beneath the sarcasm. Unlike my parents, he did not disappear when things became difficult. That first year, I challenged him 100 times. Skipping piano, sneaking TV on weeknights, and hoping he wouldn't cast me away like my parents had. He never did. He punished me, but he stayed. And I gradually realized that this was not a one-time occurrence. Looking back, the first year with Graham laid the groundwork for everything that happened after. At the time, all I knew was that I'd gone from being abandoned as a child in a rundown apartment to living in a mansion with a snarky, rule-obsessed uncle who somehow convinced me that I wasn't disposable. Even though I wouldn't accept it at the time, a part of me began to wonder if this wasn't such a bad deal. Graham was not the type to let you go. He checked my public school grades and basically stated, "This won't cut it." Before I knew it, I was enrolled at Westfield Academy. The school was tough. The classes were more challenging than anything I'd ever seen. Kids were talking about summer vacations to Europe while I was still learning out which fork to use at supper thanks to Graham's incessant table etiquette drills. I felt like I was drowning throughout my first semester. I'd spend hours at my desk eating through textbooks and still barely get by. Graham's reply was not sympathetic. One night, I came to dinner virtually in tears because of geometry proofs. He laid down his fork, gave me that look like I was wasting oxygen, and continued, "Your circumstances changed for no reason of your own, but your response is entirely up to you. Use the chance or waste it. I don't invest in lost causes." This irritated me, but it also hit home. He was not going to give me sympathy points. If I wanted to fit in at that school, I had to work hard, which I did. I used the allowance he granted me to hire a peer tutor. I created study groups. By junior year, I had clawed my way into the honor roll. Graham noticed. He didn't say, "Good job," or clap me on the back. He simply put a new leather briefcase on my bed one morning, saying, "You'll need this." That was his version of pride. At home, punishment was not optional. I used to believe he was merely controlling, but then I learned it was for training. He wanted me to be bright, organized, and ready to work at his level. It irritated me at first, but I eventually realized that those behaviors offered me an advantage. Teachers at school would comment on how well prepared I was. Classmates wondered how I always had notes ready. Graham refused to accept mediocrity. The true conflict arose during college applications. I planned to attend State University. A group of my Westfield friends were going there, and honestly, all I wanted was something familiar. Graham was not having it. He strolled into my room one night, dropped a stack of Ivy League and top-tier school brochures and said, "Apply to these." I lost it. "Why should you worry where I go? State is a fantastic school. It's my life, not your project." He remained composed. "Of course, your friends are thinking about social lives. I'm thinking about your future. You have potential. Don't waste it hiding in your comfort zone." That continued to alarm me. I never asked to be your project. Maybe I just want to be normal for once. His response was chilly and sharp. "And I never asked to be your guardian. Yet here we are. I'm giving you opportunities your parents never had. You're welcome." That gave me a headache. Not because he was incorrect, but because it was the first time he acknowledged the obvious. Neither of us had requested this arrangement, but we were stuck with it. And in his own way, he was attempting to provide me with an opportunity that my parents would never have given me. Later that night, he finally opened up, which he nearly never did. He informed me that my father was a talented mathematician who was unable to attend college due to financial constraints, and that he worked at a gas station while Graham received the scholarship. He resented me for many years. Graham remarked, "Your mother was also smart, but her prospects dried up. I will not let that happen to you." Hearing that altered everything. It did not warm him up, but it did explain why he pushed so hard. For him, this was about more than simply me. It was about breaking the cycle. I ended up applying to 7 schools just to prove that I was not intimidated. I had 5 options and chose Northwestern, a good blend of prominence and distance. When the acceptance letter arrived, Graham did not smile or cheer. He merely handed me a pen and said, "Sign it. Tuition's covered." There's no drama or sentiment, just action. I couldn't deny it, no matter how much I wanted to protest. His approach was working. By the time I prepared for college, I had changed from the kid who strolled into his mansion with only one suitcase. I was brighter, more confident, and perhaps more like him than I cared to acknowledge. College was the first time I felt like I had room to breathe. Northwestern wasn't easy, but compared to Graham's house, it was manageable. I knew how to get up early, manage my time effectively, and work harder than anyone else. While some kids were missing lessons because they partied too late, I arrived with a briefcase in hand, already 5 steps ahead. I joined clubs, challenged myself with group projects, and discovered that I had a talent for design and marketing strategy. Graham's observe everything lessons paid off. I could read a room, figure out who was lying, and utilize silence to coerce individuals into filling holes. It made presentations feel more like negotiations, which instructors observed. Graham didn't soften much while I was gone, but the distance altered our relationship. Calls grew less formal. He would occasionally crack a snarky joke. When I complained about the dining hall cuisine, he remarked, "Good. Consider it training for the real world, where everything tastes bland if you're doing it right." I worked at Whitaker Home Collections every summer. Graham didn't only assign me easy jobs. He moved me between departments as if he were testing me. Inventory one summer, vendor negotiations the next, followed by marketing. By the time I graduated, I knew the company inside and out. After graduation, I relocated back to the mansion. This time, not as a misplaced child, but as the company's new marketing director. We had a routine. Two independent men share a home. Occasionally, they eat together, and occasionally they just pass each other with nods. It was pleasant, strict, but pleasant. Over the next 6 years, I worked my way up. First as an assistant marketing director, then as head of the entire function. We launched 2 new shop formats, updated vendor relationships, and established a profitable e-commerce engine. By then, I was 27 years old. Then everything shifted. Graham sat me down one night, abnormally silent, and mentioned the word leukemia. No build-up, no soothing tone, simply the facts. It's advanced. The prognosis isn't good. Treatments will buy time, not fix it. This hit me like a truck. But Graham was not searching for sympathy. He handled it like any other business problem. "We all die," he explained. "The only variables are when and how we use the time before." After that, our roles switched. I took on the responsibility of keeping him on track, medications, doctor visits, ensuring he ate. Graham would roll his eyes whenever I reminded him, but he never fought me. He knew I was running things his way, which was direct and rigorous. At work, he progressively handed me the reins. First lesser projects, then complete decision-making. He did not hover. If I made a mistake, he would sarcastically point it out before letting me rectify it. Employees who had previously looked at me as the youngster began coming to me first once Graham made it obvious that I was not a placeholder. I was the future. The disease had stripped some of his armor. Not entirely. Even though he was hooked up to IVs, he continued to scream out snarky lines. But in calmer moments, he revealed a side I hadn't seen. When I helped him into bed one night, he gripped my wrist with surprising strength and murmured, "You were the son I never allowed myself to have." That was Graham's way of delivering a sentimental nuke. I wasn't sure what to say. I only nodded since speaking would have been false. 8 months later, he was gone. He slept peacefully. The funeral was not large. Mostly business associates, a few distant relatives, and staff that admired him. I stood at the graveyard, understanding that the guy my parents had always characterized as cold and arrogant was the only one who turned up, the only one who had genuinely built me into someone capable of standing on his own. The mansion seemed empty without his scathing remarks booming through the halls. I'd find myself saving things that I thought he'd enjoy or mentally planning how I'd tell him about a new technique before realizing he wasn't there anymore. But whether I was in mourning or not, I did not neglect my business. If Graham taught me one thing, it was that action matters more than words. So I honored him by keeping Whitaker Home Collection strong and running business the way he taught me. Sharp, disciplined, and with no half effort. This was my life for 3 weeks. Business, solitude, the heaviness of an empty house. Then the lawyer's letter arrived. A will reading was scheduled. I assumed it would be me, some business partners, and maybe a charity or two. I had no idea my parents were about to come back into my life. Weeks passed before I received a call from Caldwell, Graham's attorney. His voice sounded calm and prepared, as if he delivered this speech 100 times. "Noah, it's time we read Graham's will. I'll need you downtown next Friday." I responded, "Sure," before hanging up. I didn't think much about it until Friday came. I strolled into the marble lobby and spotted 2 folks I hadn't seen in 15 years. They were not invited. They interrupted Graham's obituary reading. They made enough noise in the foyer that Caldwell allowed them to sit so he could record their lack of standing. My parents, they walked in as if they belonged there. My mother donned a blazer that screamed outlet store business chic, with pearls swinging like she was auditioning for rich grandmother. My father wore a too-tight navy suit, his jaw clenched as if he were about to close a deal. Their gaze fixed on me and froze. "Noah," my mother gasped. "Look at you, honey." Dad gave a curt nod. "You've grown." "Yeah. Tends to happen when you feed a kid instead of tossing him outside with a trash bag," I replied. The secretary blinked awkwardly and took us to Caldwell's conference room. A long table, legal documents neatly piled, and Caldwell at the head in his clean suit, adjusting his spectacles as if preparing to defuse a bomb. He cleared his throat. "Thank you for coming. We're here to read Graham Whitaker's last will and testament." My mother raised her hand as if she were in school. "Before you start, we're Noah's parents. Graham may have stepped in, but obviously family has rights." I smirked. "Yeah. You remember that 15 years ago or just today?" Caldwell disregarded the jab and opened the folder. He read steadily without fluff. "Graham Whitaker leaves the following to his legal ward, Noah Grant. Primary residence valued at $1.8 million. Cash savings of $2 million, and 70% ownership of Whitaker Home Collections valued at approximately $45 million. The words hung in the air like smoke. I reclined back with arms folded. My parents sat transfixed, blinking as if their minds had short-circuited. Finally, my mother said, That's everything." Caldwell nodded. "Correct. Graham's instructions are clear. The estate passes entirely to Noah." My father sprang forward in his chair. "This is outrageous. Graham manipulated him. We should at least be co-managers. Noah is young. He needs guidance." I laughed. "Guidance? You guys couldn't guide me to a bus stop." Caldwell raised his hands. "I understand emotions are high, but Mr. Whitaker's wishes are explicit. If you'd like to contest, you may. I'll warn you. This document is airtight." Mom leaned in, false tears beginning to shimmer. "We're not contesting. We just want to help. Noah, honey, you know paperwork like this is confusing. You shouldn't have to handle all this pressure alone. Let us manage it for you, just until you're settled." I stared at her. "You kicked me out at 13. I think I'll manage a house deed without your supervision." Dad tightened his teeth and whispered, "Ungrateful." Caldwell, obviously bored of the hoopla, stacked the papers. "We'll reconvene later this week to finalize signatures. For today, let's adjourn." And just like that, the meeting ended. My parents followed me out of the building, almost rushing to keep up. "Noah, wait," Mom said. "Can we talk? Just dinner, maybe, please." Normally, I would have told them to shove it, but curiosity and perhaps a sick sense of humor had me nodding. "Fine. One dinner. Tonight." We met in a mid-range Italian restaurant near my home. When I arrived, they were already seated, menus untouched, and faces rehearsed. Mom started softly. "We made mistakes. We know that. But you have to understand, your father had problems back then. Gambling issues. It ruined our finances. And me? Well, I was dealing with depression. We weren't ourselves. I mixed my drink with a straw." "You don't say. I thought kicking your kid out was just a new parenting trend." They giggled uneasily, then exchanged glances. And just like that, the sympathy act failed. Dad leaned in. "We need help, Noah. Things haven't been easy. We're in debt. Your mom's medical bills alone." Mom cut him off, voice low and urgent. "If you could spare 100,000, just to get us stable again." I laughed so loudly that the waiter glanced over. 100 grand? That's your opener? Not even a warm-up, just straight to 6 figures. Dad's cheeks turned red. "You have millions now. Don't act like this is difficult." I reclined back, arms wide, and enjoyed the performance. "Correction. I have millions. You have pasta you haven't ordered yet." Mom's voice became sharper. "We're your parents. We deserve consideration." I shrugged. "You deserved consideration 15 years ago. You didn't want it then." Silence extended. The waiter eventually arrived to take orders. Awkward as hell. I chose lasagna because I knew they couldn't afford more than excuses. Dinner ended quickly. They made another appeal for money. I told them to obtain a job. Dad said something about ungrateful children destroying family legacies. Mom wiped her eyes with a tissue as if she were auditioning for pity. I walked out feeling lighter. Not because I saw them again, but because I was certain nothing had changed. Same entitlement, same games. The only difference this time was that I had the upper hand. And watching them squirm for a handout was more valuable than the inheritance itself. A week later, I was back in Caldwell's office. This time, it was not just me and him. My parents had brought in their own counsel, a man in a wrinkled gray suit who appeared to have gotten lost on his way to traffic court. They strutted in behind him like kings, shoulders back, smirks painted on their faces as if this was their victory lap. "Ready to correct this little misunderstanding?" my father asked, dropping his briefcase on the table as if he were preparing to buy the building. "Misunderstanding?" I inquired. "Yeah, must have slipped Graham's mind when he raised me for 15 years, and you didn't." Mom flashed me a phony smile. "Noah, honey, we're not here to fight you. We just don't want you to drown in responsibilities you don't understand. A company worth millions, properties, assets. This isn't a toy box." I slumped back in my chair. "You're right. It's not. That's why Graham actually trained me for this stuff while you were too busy pretending I didn't exist." Caldwell cleared his throat, then handed a binder across the table. "Before this meeting continues, there are a few clarifications we need to put on record." Their attorney puffed up. "We're prepared to challenge the will. These parents were clearly cut out unfairly. This boy," he pointed at me as if I weren't in the room, "was manipulated." I grinned. "Love when I get downgraded, too. This boy makes me feel like a gladiator about to crush someone." Caldwell did not even blink. He opened the binder and began spreading everything out page by page. First, Noah was not just Graham's ward. At 16, Graham legally adopted him. Here are the documents signed, sealed, and approved by the court. The lawyer's pen froze in midair. My mother's mouth absolutely fell. "What?" she hissed. That's impossible." Caldwell moved the papers closer. "Not impossible. Legal fact. Which means by law, Mr. and Mrs. Grant, you have no standing in this estate." Dad's cheeks got bright red. "We are his biological parents." I shrugged. "Congrats. Biology makes you donors, not parents." Caldwell persisted, calm as ever. "Second, Mr. Whitaker anticipated this. He hired private investigators. We have reports documenting repeated attempts you both made over the years to extort money from him, including phone records, bank transfers, even emails." He made a tapping noise. "It's all here. Every attempt to squeeze him dry. And now after his death, here you are again." Their lawyer shuffled papers as if he wanted to hide beneath the table. Caldwell was not done. "Third, Mr. Whitaker left a personal letter. I'll read it now." He opened a page, cleared his throat and started. "Noah, if they've shown up, I told you they would. They won't change. They'll circle back when they smell money. Don't let them take what you've earned. If they try, this letter is your shield. Remember, family isn't who brings you into the world. It's who shows up when the world walks out." The room was really silent. Caldwell then dropped the last hammer. "And lastly, the nuclear clause. If anyone contests this will, all assets, house, savings, company stake, automatically transfer to charity, specifically the Children's Cancer Foundation. To be clear, only parties with legal standing can trigger that clause. Outsiders can't, and Mr. and Mrs. Grant have no standing." I couldn't help it. I began laughing. "So go ahead, Sumi. The only thing you'll win is a donation drive." My mother smashed her hand on the table. "This is theft. You can't steal our son and our inheritance." "Funny," I commented, leaning nearer. "Because last time I checked, you already threw your son out. Now you're just mad someone better took your spot." Dad snarled. "You'll regret this." I leaned back, relaxed as always. "No, I won't. But you might regret not investing in a mirror. That irritated Mom. You little brat. After everything we gave you. Like what? I interrupted. The night you dumped me on a sidewalk? Or the years of silence after? Real Hallmark stuff. They tried to shout over me and use every guilt trip in the book. We are your true family. You'll understand what loyalty entails when you're older. Graham brainwashed you. But it was pathetic. They sounded like children whining after being caught stealing cookies. The lawyer attempted to pull them in, but they were too far gone. Mom gestured at me as if she were conjuring lightning. You think you're so clever, but you're still just a child. You'll fall apart without us. I smirked. I've been falling apart without you my whole life. Guess what? I'm still standing. Caldwell waved, and 2 building security guards entered. That will be all. Please escort Mr. and Mrs. Grant out. The look on their faces as security took a step forward was priceless. They began protesting, stating they had a right to be there and wanting to talk with someone higher up. But Caldwell simply closed his binder and announced, "Meeting is over." Watching my parents being marched out of that glass tower, screaming and writhing as everyone in the lobby stared, that was the kind of satisfaction money couldn't buy. Their screams of betrayal, loyalty, and blood rang around the marble hall. However, everyone else saw them as 2 entitled lunatics. Security took my parents out of Caldwell's office as if they were shoplifters who refused to confess they were caught. But I knew it was not over. People like them do not absorb no. They interpret it as try again louder. I did not wait. I drove immediately to the courts to file for a temporary restraining order. The judge signed it that afternoon. That night, a process server handed them the documents, and I emailed the case number to the police to ensure it was on file. I expected at least a week until the next stunt, but they didn't even allow me 48 hours. The driveway camera showed their rental car creeping in after dark, headlights lowered as if they assumed Hertz offered stealth mode for free. My mother was dressed like she was going to church, and my father looked like he was prepared to market himself as a motivational speaker. Both went up my driveway as if the place belonged to them. The doorbell continued to ring. They leaned on it as if they were restarting the home. I opened the door just enough to obstruct the entryway. Restraining orders still active. You can't be here. Mom smiled with that phony kindness she often had for those she wanted something from. We just want 5 minutes. Great, I said. Take it outside the gate. You've got 4.5 left. Naturally, they shoved past me as if I were a rental property manager. Dad studied every part of the foyer as if he were mentally listing everything on Craigslist. Mom trailed her hand along the banister as if she were already deciding where to place her vases. This place, she remarked, glancing around in her sales pitch tone. It was meant for family. It is, I said. Just not the kind that abandons their kid and comes back 20 years later with a handout. That shattered her smile for a moment. Then Dad stepped in. Drop the attitude. Without us, you'd still be nothing. You owe us. I cocked my head toward the corner where the red light flashed. Say it louder for the camera. Judges love this kind of material. His face turned crimson. Mom moved to the guilt-trip script, telling me how difficult it was to raise children, how much they sacrificed, and how ungrateful I was. Dad used intimidation tactics, puffing his chest, lifting his chin, and screaming phrases about respect. It was like watching the world's worst performers compete to see who could sound the most delusional. I did not budge. I leaned against the wall and let them finish the script until they realized I wasn't interrupting. When they ran out of lines, I gestured towards the driveway. Time's up. Walk out or the cops escort you. Dad smirked. Call them. We'll tell them our son locked his own parents out of their home. Perfect, I replied immediately, dialing. Make sure you spell trespassing right when you file your complaint. Cops arrived quicker than I thought. They were previously aware of the restraining order and had completed the necessary paperwork. They answered questions out of politeness, but their body language was clear. They were tired of repeat offenders wasting time. After a brief conversation, the police informed my parents that they had 60 seconds to go or they would be riding in the back seat. My mother gave one more sympathy speech, and my father murmured about misunderstandings, but it didn't matter. They returned to their rental and peeled out, looking smaller than I had ever seen them. For the first time, I recognized they were neither powerful nor frightening. They were simply noisy. The house felt different after they left. Not in a hefty way, but in the sense that no one was circling to take it. It was mine, Graham's legacy, and I wasn't going to let two freeloaders with my DNA rip it apart. I did not squander time. The next morning, I met with the operations and finance leaders. We tore into the firm as Graham would have desired. There's no fluff or dead weight to drag. We removed non-selling products, repaired the shipping system that was costing us money, and redesigned the web store so it didn't appear like it was constructed on dial-up. Within 2 months, internet sales had doubled. The physical stores eventually moved inventory when we stopped allowing boxes to rot in the back. By the end of the quarter, we had approved 2 new growth sites, the ones Graham had circled in his notes years prior. But this time, it wasn't a gamble. It was regulated, clean, and profitable. Employees noticed. They initially regarded me as if I had been fortunate enough to inherit a business from my uncle. But when problems were fixed before they snowballed, paychecks were delivered on time, and I was present rather than hiding in some corner office, they began bringing me serious issues before they became fires. That is how you gain trust. Not with speeches, but with representatives. At home, I kept going through Graham's notes. There was one box I hadn't opened until recently, a wooden chest that he kept shut. Inside were ledgers, correspondence, and a stack of envelopes labeled with the year, his method of leaving me breadcrumbs. The most recent one stated, "When you are ready." Inside was a single sheet of paper. "Trust yourself. Do not wait for permission. Build it better than I did." Short, crisp, and straight to the point. Exactly like him. I still had the cameras rolling. Maybe my parents will try again. Perhaps they won't. Entitlement does not die. It simply hides until it believes you're exhausted. But I was not exhausted. Every time I drove by the lot where our new store was being built, every time a balance sheet showed black instead of red, and every time I closed up the house knowing it was safe, it seemed like another nail in their coffin of control. They got their shot when I was a kid. They threw it aside. Graham scooped it up and transformed it into something. And now it was up to me to help it thrive rather than just survive. That is what kept me moving forward. The last time I saw my parents was on a blurry video from outside the fence. They drove slowly, windows down, staring like visitors who couldn't buy the ticket inside. They did not stop. They did not ring. They just peered, undoubtedly aware that the only way they'd ever see the interior was through the security camera. I didn't wave. I did not even step outdoors. I simply let the camera film them drive away, smaller and smaller, until they vanished. Graham shared with me once, "Some people grow when they lose power. Others shrink. Your parents, they'll shrink. You better grow." I didn't understand it then. Now I do. And while I stood in the office looking at our quarterly stats on the screen, hearing staff joke in the hallway, and watching construction crews break ground on new stores, I realized I was maturing. Now on to the next story. Story 2. My parents took my money, then left me behind for a trip with my sister. When they returned, their house was empty, and the truth shattered them all. I never imagined I would be the one to pen this tale. Yet, here we are, having spent the better part of 3 decades acting as an emotional punching bag and personal ATM for my family. My name is Sarah, and here is the story of how I finally stood up to them. Allow me to begin at the very beginning. Even though I'm 3 years my senior, my sister Emily has always been the favored sibling. She had an air of spontaneity and charisma that I lacked, whereas I was reserved and responsible. She spent money like water and never worried about consequences since someone would always bail her out. In contrast to me, who saved every penny and worked part-time jobs through high school and college. In most cases, it was me. I got a fantastic job in Austin at a tech company just after I graduated with a computer science degree. And 3 years ago, when Emily was a sophomore in college, she left to follow her artistic goals, which mostly included working part-time at a shop owned by her mom's friend and creating lifestyle material on Instagram. Even though she was 27 years old, she was still living at home and wasn't helping out with the bills. In contrast to me, who has been sending $900 to my parents every month since I was 21 to put toward a mortgage. You'd think I'd be appreciated or respected because of this arrangement, but you'd be mistaken. On the contrary, I was scolded for being uncaring about my spending habits, antisocial about my job, and unsupportive of Emily's efforts. After years of driving a 16-year-old Honda, my mom thought it was arrogant of me to treat myself to a good car. My dad accused me of betraying the family when I got my own place. I continued to pay. Nevertheless, through it all, I was there to lend a hand. I held out hope that they would see I was the one who had done the right thing and had merited their admiration and pride in due time. Parental announcement of a 2-week European vacation in celebration of their 30th anniversary was the last straw 7 months ago. I felt real joy for them because they've been discussing it for so long. After all their hard work, they were worthy of a relaxing vacation. "We're bringing Emily along," Mom said during Sunday dinner. I looked up from my plate, perplexed as she said she needs some inspiration for her blog and the photos will be amazing. Asking, "What about me?" Dad moved uncomfortably. "Emily is in dire need of this at the moment. She's been going through a lot of emotional turmoil over her future. I offered to pay for my own ticket because, honey, we can only afford to take one of you girls." However, a shiver ran down my spine as I uttered those words. The mother disapprovingly waved her palm. "Oh, Sarah, I know how you get when you travel. All nervous and worried about schedules and budgets. Emily will be loads of fun when you're not around. Plus, you can afford to take a vacation whenever you want." I sat there in stunned silence as they continued to plan their trip, talking about museums Emily wanted to visit and restaurants she found on Pinterest. No one inquired as to my preferred sightseeing spots or where I would like to go. I felt completely invisible. I returned to my flat that night and took stock of my life. For nearly a decade, I had been making payments on my parents' mortgage. Her car broke down and she couldn't get financing, so I ended up buying it for her. Innumerable meals, presents, and unexpected expenses were covered by me. When my parents required new furniture and appliances, I had already equipped half of their house. Because I'm completely preoccupied with money, I meticulously kept all of the receipts for everything. Also, what was the return on investment? A family that thought I was nothing more than a walking checkbook, too nervous and uninteresting to merit a spot on their ideal vacation. My preparations began the following morning. However, before I could do anything, I had to grasp the entire extent of my contributions over the years. All weekend long, I combed through my bank records, credit card statements, and other financial documents. I meticulously organized all of my family's purchases in a spreadsheet that would have impressed my accounting professor. It was mind-boggling. In addition to the $97,000 I had estimated for mortgage payments, an additional $46,000 came from direct purchases. The price tag for the fridge was $2,900. The price tag for the living room set was $4,400. I co-signed for Emily's auto loan when it was $17,000 and have now taken over the payments after she went into default. She used to pay out of herself for things like her laptop, photographic gear, designer clothes, and medical costs when she didn't have health insurance. It was cumulative. In addition, I had been paying for minor costs that taken together appeared enormous. Sunday dinners with my family where I would gladly take the bill. Whenever Mom said that they were low on something, we went grocery shopping. Emily needed gas money while she was unemployed. All members of their family, including acquaintances and extended family, received birthday and holiday presents. I took on the role of family treasurer, paying for my parents' memberships to various clubs and even taking them on spa days. I felt both gratified and horrified looking at those figures. I felt vindicated because it confirmed that my reaction was reasonable. For years, I had been financially supporting this family. Sad because I had no idea how utterly gullible I had been and how much I had allowed myself to be taken advantage of. The most frustrating aspect was going back to all the instances when they had made me feel bad about not providing more. Mother had accused me of being egotistical and jealous when I was hesitant to co-sign for Emily's vehicle loan. Instead of phoning me for emergency funds, I suggested they make a budget. And my dad said I was being arrogant and had forgotten my roots. Because I had taken their judgment to heart and ignored my own needs for an extended period of time, I had lost sight of what was truly important to me. Can you remember the last time you treated yourself to something good without beating yourself up over it? To be honest, when was the last time I was able to relax and enjoy a trip without fretting over whether or not I would be able to meet my family's financial obligations? On that particular Sunday, I took a new look at the house where I had spent my childhood as I drove past it. The outside looked great. Its landscaping was exquisite. In addition, Emily's immaculately clean automobile was in the driveway. No one living here was obviously having money problems. Living above their means became second nature to this family since they knew they could always rely on someone else to help them up when they fell. My ideal apartment would be small, functional, and stocked with inexpensive, gently used furniture. I had been supporting my family's upper-middle-class lifestyle by living like a college student. The difference was hideous. I inquired about the possibility of prolonged remote work on Monday morning by calling the HR department at my workplace. I was surprised to hear that they were already planning to increase their footprint in Austin and were willing to let me work remotely, provided I kept up my productivity. Possibilities I hadn't given much thought to before were brought to light in that discussion. My home might be any place in a new environment unrecognizable as Emily's sister or the responsible daughter. I could begin anew. Relationships might be formed around my genuine self, not my abilities but my presence. I set out to find alternative locations to Austin that have thriving tech cultures and more affordable housing. My inquiries kept leading me to Denver. Possibilities for outdoor recreation abound and housing expenses are manageable. I fell in love with the mountains during my one conference visit, but I never thought of it as a possible home because of how far away from family responsibilities it felt. At last, the perceived distance was an asset, not a flaw. Figuring out where I stood legally was the next stage. A lawyer who focused in family law and asset recovery was someone I contacted and scheduled a meeting with. For every item I had bought over the years, I had pictures, receipts, and a spreadsheet to prove it. "This is quite thorough," she remarked as she perused my paperwork. "Most people don't keep records like this." "I've always been obsessive about finances," I pointed out. What I discovered about Texas gift law was both fascinating and frustrating. But I'm glad you asked since I scan and file everything. Unless you transfer title through a formal document that the receiver can use to establish it was a permanent gift. You legally maintain ownership when you buy anything as a present. Formal transfers and contracts are not typically used in family interactions. They rest on unspoken understandings and presumptions. The lawyer added that the difficulty is in establishing purpose. It may get messy if your relatives assert that they were present with the intention of transferring ownership. With the help of documented emails and text messages, I produced proof that I was just providing temporary assistance. "Look at this exchange about the refrigerator." Mom texted, "Thanks for covering this until we can pay you back." And here's Dad saying he'd make it up to me when his bonus came through. The legal representative grinned. "This changes everything. If they acknowledge these as loans or temporary assistance, you have a much stronger case for reclaiming the property." For the first time in years, I felt empowered as I stepped out of her office. I was not insane. There was no egotism on my part. Because I had been victimized by systemic exploitation, I was entitled to recover what rightfully belonged to me. I began to formulate specific strategies for the subsequent days. In cases when secrecy and promptness were paramount, such as when families were dissolving or assets were being divided, I looked into moving businesses that focused on these specific needs. I made an appointment for a consultation after seeing one that had rave reviews. Patricia, the relocation coordinator, was kind and competent. "We see this more often than you'd think," she pointed out. "Adult children who've been supporting parents and need to reclaim their contributions. The key is having proper documentation and moving quickly to avoid confrontations." "How quickly?" I put forward. "Ideally, you want everything out within 24 to 48 hours. The longer it takes, the more opportunity there is for interference or legal complications." I planned the relocation for the Wednesday following my family's departure for Europe. With a whole day to myself, I could check on everything and make sure nothing got broken or overlooked. Maintaining an air of normalcy at the last few family dinners before their travel was the most challenging part. I overheard several discussions regarding their schedule, Emily's enthusiasm for the photo ops, and their guesses as to which Iris they would visit. No one inquired about my day-to-day activities, my job, or my emotional state over my exclusion from this significant family event. Mom showed me pictures of a Paris boutique hotel they had reserved during one excruciatingly agonizing supper. "I'm in love with it," she exclaimed. I meant it when I said, "It looks lovely." Emily had found the place on a travel site. "The rooms are small, but the location is ideal. We almost upgraded to a suite that could fit 3 people," he said. I learned all I needed to know about my role in this household from the nonchalant way he responded. "Maybe next time," without making any specific plans or promises. But it was simply too pricey. I was treated as a money resource at worst and an afterthought at best. In the meantime, Emily had been continuously updating her social media with images of her new outfits, screenshots of Instagram posts from the places they would be visiting, and countdowns to her departure from Europe. Friends were so happy for her and expressed their sorrow that she would be missed by leaving dozens of likes and comments on each post. Because no one had any idea I had been first rejected from this trip. No one was mentioning how much they missed me. After that, I began looking into it. After the family's refrigerator died 4 years ago, I researched every large purchase I had made for them. It was rightfully mine as I paid for it directly and had the receipt. This also applies to the dining room table and chairs, the washer and dryer, Emily's MacBook Pro, the new family room TV, and approximately 30 additional things, all of which accumulate to nearly $42,000. To double-check that I was aware of my rights, I consulted an attorney. Unless you specifically transfer it through a legal instrument, it turns out that you maintain ownership when you purchase anything as a gift. I was fortunate, as most families don't fill out gift papers. The next thing I did was locate a stunning Denver apartment. Colorado had always been my dream home, but I'd never given it much thought because I felt a strong need to be near my family. Everything I had imagined was there: mountains, outdoor sports, and a booming tech scene. While continuing with my remote work arrangement, I gave my notice at my present apartment, arranged for movers, and began looking for a new position in Denver. It seemed as if the cosmos was finally on my side because everything just clicked into place. I enjoyed my final family supper together 2 weeks before to their departure. As they showed me their travel plans and the outfits that Emily had purchased on Mom's credit card, they were absolutely overjoyed. No one inquired as to my well-being or the latest developments in my life. "Be sure to capture plenty of photographs," I remarked, breaking into a genuine smile after months of suppressed expression. "Oh, we certainly will," Emily cooped. "I'm going to get so much content out of this. My follower count is going to explode." "I'm sure it will," he said. It was Tuesday morning when they set out. As we gathered their belongings into Dad's car, I said them farewell from the driveway. As soon as their rear lights dipped behind the bend, I retrieved my phone and abruptly ended a call. "Hi. This is Sarah Mitchell. I'd like to schedule a pickup for tomorrow morning." The movers I'd engaged were experts in handling sensitive shipments. Without interrupting or asking any questions, they worked quickly and expertly. In addition to receipts and photos, I had a comprehensive inventory of all the items I bought. In the event that there were to be any disagreements in the future, the lawyer had officialized my ownership claims. Wednesday saw the arrival of a truck and the meticulous removal of all the family gifts I had purchased. They did an excellent job with the specific handling of the refrigerator, dishwasher, and washer-dryer set. Careful attention was given to wrapping and loading the furnishings. Everything from the coffee maker and blender to Emily's laptop and even tiny objects were securely packed. My parents' house appeared to have been struck by the most selective tornado on Earth by Thursday evening. Everything that my parents or Emily had bought for themselves, including all the family portraits, stayed displayed on the walls. Large appliances, however, were missing, replaced with empty rooms with dangling cords and holes. Although the old sofa and coffee table from the garage were still in the living room, the TV, sound system, and entertainment center were nowhere to be found. They stored the little table and 4 chairs in the dining room. I experienced a complicated range of feelings as I walked through the house for the last time. Seeing the tangible results of my labor throughout the years was rewarding. Sadness and the noticeable absence of a refrigerator go hand in hand. I was removing myself from their everyday lives when I entered this mansion that contained decades of memories. I stood for a moment in Emily's room, staring at the empty spot where her desk had once stood. When she first enrolled in community college, I furnished her desk, chair, and light. I had hoped that she would have a dedicated study room where she could concentrate on her schoolwork. For the most part, she had used it to showcase her cosmetics and serve as a charging station for her numerous electrical devices. She had returned from the garage with her shaky little desk from middle school. Perched on top of it, her laptop gave the impression of being both heavy and unstable. I had given up on the laptop even though I had paid for it because it felt too intimate, too tied to her job. Now that I see the scenario, though, I'm not sure whether I was generous enough. I went to my parents' bedroom and noticed the holes where their new nightstands and dresser had formerly been. Despite having painted and decorated the room, they had gone back to using the same worn-out furniture that they had used for the past 21 years. It would be hard to turn a blind eye to the striking difference. Because of how drastically it had been changed, I found myself spending more time in the kitchen. The white builder-grade refrigerator from 1997, which scarcely met the family's demands, even when I was a high school student, had moved from the garage to the middle of the room. Without my coffee machine, blender, and stand mixer, which I had acquired along the years, the countertops were empty. They had even removed the microwave, which had been a countertop type from their previous flat, and was now taking up precious counter space. That this kitchen had hosted countless family meals where I had been made to feel bad about myself or thankful for what I had wasn't lost on me. It appeared to be what it was before I added anything. The kitchen of a low-income household coping with limited resources, including outdated appliances and a small cooking area. Not maliciously, but just to capture everything, I snapped pictures of everything. For legal reasons, or in the event that my relatives sought to sue me for taking more than I had paid for, I needed photographic evidence of the condition of the house, as it was when I departed. I took one last lap around the living room before I got up and left. They dug out an old couch from the garage. It had a fading floral print, something Mom had always despised. Accompanying it was a coffee table with wear and tear in the form of ring stains and a shaky side table. Before I bought this one, the guest bedroom had a little old TV that was fine for basic viewing, but lacked the size and quality of the one I now have. This room seemed frozen in time from 16 years ago when my parents were just starting out financially and couldn't afford the things they had been used to. It served as a sobering reminder of their true financial situation prior to their eldest daughter's subsidies. As I sat at the coffee table I had purchased to replace their shaky old one, memories of spending hours here with my family watching movies or assisting Emily with her schoolwork flooded my mind. Knowing that my family had viewed my contributions as duties rather than pleasures, as proof of my position as breadwinner, rather as expressions of affection and support, cast a shadow over those cherished memories. I knew I would likely never see this house again as I stood in its threshold. Our relationship would still be very different. Even if my family and I were to reconcile in the end, which seemed highly improbable. If they ever needed money or wanted to upgrade their lifestyle, I would never be the one they called. Their convenience would never again take precedence over my personal safety net. It seemed as if taking my input out of the house had diminished not only its practicality, but also its potential. A middle-class house filled with middle-class people leading middle-class lives. That's exactly what it seemed like. That wasn't inherently bad, but it was definitely not the upper-middle-class luxury they'd experienced before I helped them. After securing the door, I slid the key and the note I had written into the mail slot. I turned around as I walked to my car. I had officially ended that part of my life. As I returned the home key, I placed a note on the kitchen counter to remind myself. Please be informed that I have returned all of the products that I have purchased throughout the years. I have receipts for everything that has been removed. I have placed copies of the paperwork on the counter for your reference. I have relocated to Denver and will not be returning. You have no need to worry about the mortgage payments I've made. I've determined that I've contributed about $96,000 toward your house over the years, which more than covers the value of the items I've taken. So, consider us even. I hope you had a wonderful vacation. I now see that my role in this family was to provide financial support without receiving any emotional support in return. My new life is about to begin. Dear Sarah, P.S. Emily, I'm no longer going to pay for your lifestyle. Therefore, you should probably get a job. Your laptop is in your room. On Saturday morning, I loaded up a U-Haul trailer with my personal possessions and drove away. As I ran, a weight lifted off my shoulders as if I were letting go of years' worth of bitterness and let down. After a trip to Europe, they got back on Sunday. At 11:37 p.m., my phone began to ring. That evening, as I set up my furnishings in my brand new Denver apartment, I began to unload the boxes, real furniture that belonged to me, invested my own money on this for my personal use. I remained silent. There was an endless barrage of calls from Mom and Dad to Emily and even some distant relatives who had evidently joined the cause. They were all directed to voicemail by me. I got around to listening to the messages on Monday morning. My mom was inconsolable. Sarah, what have you done? The house is empty. How could you do this to us? We're your family. The father was furious. As expected, Emily became all dramatic. This is theft, Sarah. You can't just take things because you paid for them. They were gifts. You've ruined everything. How am I supposed to work without my computer? You're destroying my career before it even starts. Each of the 19 voicemails was more venomous than the last. They have all failed to recognize the fact that I have been providing for my family financially for a long time. Nobody ever said anything about how terrible it was to leave me out of the vacation plans. What I had taken was their only concern. They paid no attention to what I had given. All of their numbers were blocked and I erased them. On Tuesday, the lawyer I had previously consulted called me. My folks apparently reported stolen goods to the authorities even after my attorney faxed over all of my paperwork. The investigating officer who took the report remained professional but suspicious. Your daughter has receipts for everything, the officer had supposedly informed my father. She paid for it. She owns it. This is a civil matter at best, and frankly, she's got a stronger case than you do. The inbox was flooded with emails on Wednesday, each one lengthy and filled with emotional manipulation and guilt trips. Mom mentioned in her letter how humiliated she felt that the neighbors could see the house in its present condition. Concerned about the cost of rebuilding everything, Dad shifted his attention. Emily's email was a model of egotism. It described the negative effects my self-centered actions were having on her emotional well-being and her ability to think creatively. I give them a quick read before establishing an auto-delete filter. I had had enough of being the recipient of their emotional baggage. It wasn't until Friday that I began working for a tech startup in Denver. It was an interesting and demanding job. Everyone I worked with was nice, and my boss took an interest in me as an employee and my plans for advancement. My income was at an all-time high. Plus, I had complete freedom to spend every cent for the first time as an adult. A certified letter from a legal firm arrived in my mailbox 3 weeks subsequent. My parents were on the verge of suing me to get their belongings back. Please handle this as you feel appropriate. I included a note when I sent it to my attorney. He almost couldn't control his laughter when he called me the next day. They don't have a legal leg to stand on, stated the judge. I'll send them a response outlining your documentation and suggest they drop this before they rack up more legal fees they can't afford. It would appear that their threats of legal action ended there. Call from my cousin Olivia came a month after that. She managed to get my new number and was the only relative with whom I had ever had a cordial relationship. Sarah, she stated with care, I know there are two sides to every story, but I have to ask, did you really clean out your parents' house while they were on vacation? I took back the things I bought over the years, I informed him. Everything I removed, I had paid for. The silence was quite lengthy, asking, how much stuff are we talking about? I provided her with an approximate rundown. Once again, a great pause. Jesus, Sarah. I had no idea you'd bought so much for them. They never mentioned it. The question prompted me to ask, are you kidding? They've been telling everyone you stole their belongings out of spite because you weren't invited on vacation. They made it sound like you took family heirlooms and wedding gifts. I asserted forcefully. I left everything that genuinely belonged to them. Every family photo, every piece of jewelry, every item of sentimental value. I only took things I had receipts for. For an instant, Olivia remained silent. You know what? Good for you. I always wondered why you kept giving them money when they treated you like crap. I took heart from that discussion because it offered me the possibility that not everyone would view myself as the antagonist. Emily contacted me 2 months later using an unfamiliar phone. Curiosity ultimately led me to answer even though I nearly didn't. Sarah, she said in a modest voice that contrasted with the passionate tone of her voicemails. Please don't hang up. What do you want, Jess? Her voice barely above a whisper. She announced, I got a job at a marketing firm entry level, but it's a real job with benefits and everything. Congratulations. I wanted to apologize, she said, her voice choking. I never realized how much you did for us. I mean, I knew you helped out, but I didn't understand the extent of it until everything was gone. And Mom and Dad couldn't replace any of it. I'm home. They're really struggling, Sarah. Dad's talking about taking out a loan to buy a new refrigerator. Mom's been doing laundry at the laundromat because they can't afford a new washer. They were able to do it before I became involved, I stated consistently. They'll figure it out. I know you're angry and you have every right to be, but couldn't you at least help with the basics just until they get back on their feet? It was right there. She continued to demand payment even after she had apologized. No, I replied plainly. But Sarah, I spent 10 years being your family's financial safety net, I said. 12 years of my life making sure everyone else was comfortable while being treated like I didn't matter. I'm done. So that's it? You're just going to abandon us? Emily, you're 25 years old with a job and no major expenses. Mom and Dad are in their 50s with their own income and a partially paid-off mortgage thanks to my contributions. You're not abandoned. You're just not being subsidized anymore. She ended the call without bidding farewell. My high school pal Sarah, who had evidently been chatting with my mom in the supermarket, asked to be my Facebook friend 3 months later. She communicated with me. Your mom seems to think you had some kind of breakdown and moved away impulsively. She's asking people if they know how to contact you because she's worried about your mental health. Just thought you should know what story she's spreading. Sarah was thanked and I revised my preferences about privacy. It was my family's prerogative to change my tale so that I am portrayed as the unstable daughter who had a breakdown. Important people were aware of the reality. I had flourished in my new life for 6 months. My career took a turn for the better. I gained true friends who accepted me for myself, not my abilities. And I began going on frequent hikes in the breathtaking Colorado Rockies. For the first time in years, I was able to save money without feeling guilty and purchase a new car that I selected based solely on my personal preferences. Someone I met in a hiking group was also someone I began dating. James was an honest software developer who shared my values of being frugal and forthright about how he felt. Even after I gave him a very condensed version of my family's history, he made no attempt to persuade me to make amends or even propose that we should forgive each other. He only remarked, "Sounds like you made a healthy decision," before shifting the conversation to our weekend agenda. I was pleasantly surprised by the reception I had hoped for. Olivia contacted me once more last month. I wanted to inform you, she stated. Your parents are planning to drive out to Denver to surprise you for your birthday. I felt numb all over. How did they get my address? I don't know, but they're convinced that if they just show up and talk to you face to face, they can convince you to come home and work things out. Olivia, I need you to understand something. I don't want to work things out. I don't want them to visit. I've built a new life here, and I'm happy for the first time in years. She uttered the words, I understand, quite rapidly. That's why I'm warning you. Maybe you could go out of town that weekend. That was not my best effort. I contacted my attorney who promptly sent a letter demanding that the harasser not contact me or visit my home, stating that such actions constituted harassment. Moreover, I let the front desk know that my family was not welcome and enhanced the security system of my apartment complex. My birthday was a calm and serene affair. They would never have left the building's lobby even if they drove all the way to Denver. Yes, that happened 2 weeks ago. I hope the message finally got through because I haven't heard from anyone since. The stillness has had a calming and unnerving effect. The whole lack of touch seems surprising after years of continual communication, including phone calls requesting assistance, texts on family obligations, and emails with links to items Emily wanted me to purchase. Not because I'm eager to hear from them, but because this unusual silence is making me nervous. I find myself reaching for my phone more frequently than normal. In order to fill that emptiness, I've begun engaging in new relationships and pursuits. My week now revolves around the hiking group, and I've also joined a reading club that meets at a nearby coffee shop. On weekends, I'm finally able to pursue my lifelong dream of taking a photography class, something I neglected while attending to other people's emergencies. Even though I've been careful not to bore James with the intricacies of my family problems, he has been tremendously supportive during this adjustment. After meeting a few of the other trekkers, he felt well at home among them. Being with folks who know me just as Sarah, the software engineer who enjoys mountain trails and craft beer rather than Sarah, the family ATM with complex guilt issues, is a breath of fresh air. For the first time ever, I've also started collaborating with a financial advisor. You can't plan for the future when you're always transferring funds to aid other people. I am currently educating myself on retirement accounts, investing methods, and savings objectives. Now that my income is fully independent, opening my first individual retirement account, IRA, at the age of 28 is embarrassing, but better late than never. Upon reviewing my spending habits in the past, the advisor was taken aback. You were essentially supporting a household of 3 adults on top of your own expenses, according to her. No wonder you weren't building wealth despite having a good salary. Predictions of my financial situation in 5 or 10 years from now, assuming I keep saving at my present rate, are both fascinating and frustrating to look at. Thrilling since those are some rather big numbers. If I had enough money, I could buy a house outright, take many trips, and maybe even retire early. It annoys me because it shows that I wasted a lot of money on people who didn't value it. I've been concerned about the way my loved ones are coping with their recent situation. Olivia has provided infrequent updates, suggesting that the change has been challenging. It seems like Mom spent the first month or so after their return complaining to neighbors about how let down she was by me, presenting herself as the unfortunate victim of a breakdown caused by an ungrateful daughter. During our previous conversation, Olivia informed me, "She keeps talking about how much you've changed." She said, "You used to be so generous and family-oriented, and now you're selfish and cold." She seems genuinely confused about why you left. My mother's self-awareness is on full display when she fails to link their treatment of me to my departure. She blames my character transformation rather than the dysfunctional family dynamic that drove me out. At the same time, Emily has had to face the fact that she is a real grown-up with real bills now that she is 25 years old. Olivia brought up the fact that she has been griping about the fact that she is responsible for her own food and gas, and that she is having trouble making it to her new work on time due to the fact that she cannot afford to get her car fixed. She wanted to know if you would be able to lend a hand with the car, Olivia cautiously explained. I told her that ship had sailed. It's noteworthy that Emily continues to seek external solutions to her problems despite everything that has transpired. She is unfamiliar with the concept of having to put money aside, look into financing possibilities, or change her lifestyle to fit her actual salary. It would appear that Dad has taken a more practical view of things, prioritizing the replacement of necessary items over attempting to restore their previous level of life. Along with the used fridge and washing machine that he purchased, they are surviving on smaller, older versions of all the other appliances. To make ends meet in the face of these unforeseen costs, he has reportedly been working extra shifts. According to Olivia noticed that he appeared to be somewhat relieved, as if he was aware that they were living beyond their means, but was unsure of how to rectify the situation. The remark lingered in my mind for several days. Is it possible that my family's unsustainable lifestyle is a direct result of the financial aid I provided? Had I helped them put off the tough decisions that would have improved their financial habits in the long run? As I reflect, I can't help but think of all the years I spent stressing out over their rent, utilities, and unexpected expenses. I distinctly recall spending many sleepless nights trying to figure out how I was going to pay for that unforeseen bill or that repair. I can vividly recall the pressures of shouldering the financial burden of not just myself, but also 3 other people whose careless choices had far-reaching implications. I was there to catch them every time, so they never had to worry about that. No purchase was ever turned down since they could always count on someone else to foot the bill. Because the burden was constantly placed on me, they were shielded from the true consequences of their decisions. I had wounded both herself and them while attempting to assist them. Sometimes people wonder if I'm missing my family or if I'm remorseful about my choice. To tell you the truth, it's not easy. Are the customs of my family and the folks who have known me my entire life something I long for? On occasion, do I feel bad about being firm and not letting anyone take advantage of me? At no point. What I've realized is that just because someone is connected to you doesn't mean they can treat you badly. I've realized that being generous with money is pointless if it's not accompanied with basic decency and regard all else. I've realized that my value is greater than the material goods I can sell. I used to base my entire existence on putting other people's comfort before my own. Everything in my new life revolves around my personal beliefs, aspirations, and joy. You won't believe the change. If you or someone you know is going through something similar, for example, feeling like a number rather than a person being repeatedly given to without ever being given back, please know that you are not alone and that there are solutions available to you. No one has a right to expect you to continue supporting them financially, particularly if they show no gratitude. If someone persistently treats you like an outsider and disregards your feelings, you have no obligation to be a part of their life. Taking a break is sometimes the most self-loving thing you can do. I have accepted the truth that my family's comprehension isn't essential to my happiness. Even if I doubt they will ever comprehend my departure or take responsibility for their part in driving me away. With those that welcome me with open arms, I am establishing new customs. Exciting excursions to destinations of my choosing, accompanied by people who cherish my company, are in the works. I've decided to stop supporting other people's goals and start saving for my own. Plus, I've never felt more at peace with my life as an adult than I do right now. Recent development. I wanted to give you an update on how things are doing since I relocated to Denver over a year ago. Being in a relationship for the first time is an exciting and daunting prospect. But James and I are discussing the possibility of moving in together. Along with the hiking group, he has become acquainted with a few of my new acquaintances. Unless I want to share it, no one here is aware of my family drama, and that is a tremendous relief. Things are going swimmingly at work. I'm being considered for a senior developer role, which would provide a substantial salary increase, and I've been assigned some prominent projects. When I stopped caring about other people's financial problems, my career took off, which is ironic but true. Additionally, I've begun therapy sessions with the primary goal of resolving the resentment and shame I feel toward my family. With her guidance, I've come to realize that my parents' destructive patterns of conduct predated my enabling them, and that my departure likely brought about some much-needed repercussions they've been dodging for a long time. No one has spoken to any members of my family at all. Every once in a while, Olivia will fill me in when I ask, but I've learned to cut down on our updates because hearing them always makes me feel down or furious. Even though they purchased pre-owned goods and scaled-down versions of everything, my parents did in the end replace the majority of the appliances I had taken with them. Emily reportedly received a little promotion while she was still employed by the marketing agency. Nothing is wrong with the house. Life continues and everyone has enough to eat and wear. They seem to have finally come to terms with the fact that I won't be returning since they ceased requesting my contact details from Olivia. I can't help but wonder if they ever got the full story of my departure, or if they continue to view me as the selfish, harsh daughter who for some reason lost touch with reality. However, they will continue to tell themselves that story. Plus, I've given up on attempting to manage it. Contrast that with my tale. The story follows a woman who in her 20s helped out petty people and in her 30s finally found her footing and started living the life she always dreamed of. It's about understanding the distinction between genuine generosity and being taken advantage of. You can love your family and yet opt out of their dysfunction. That's what this book is about. Whatever the future brings, I am certain that it is up to me to choose. That independence is priceless after years of catering to the wants and expectations of others. Revenge isn't always best served in a flashy or instantaneous fashion. Living successfully without those who failed to recognize your worth when they could have is sometimes all it takes. Your value exceeds the value you bring to others. And I say this to everybody who needs to hear it. You are worthy of relationships characterized by true love, respect, and understanding. Separating yourself from others who fail to see your worth is sometimes the most courageous thing you can do. You will not regret making the effort to reach the other side for the vista. Now on to the next story. Story 3. Dad threw a plate at me on live stream. "Give your brother the apartment," he screamed. But Grandpa walked in, took my side, and now they're crying. Imagine this. You're at the dinner table when your father throws a dish of spaghetti right in your face in front of the entire family. What would you do? I have been there. Tomato sauce spilled across my collar, splashed in my face, seeped into my hair, and dripped on the table. However, the mess was not the most terrible part. It was my mother's blank expression and the sound of my younger brother giggling as he live-streamed the entire affair. I feel completely degraded, but none of that really startled me. My grandfather made the decision when he walked into that hectic kitchen. Stay with me. Let me explain what happened next. Hello, everyone. I am Eric Cole. I am 27 years old and currently live in Sacramento, California. I work as a software developer for a firm that specializes in automation technology. Employment gives a consistent income, allowing me to sustain myself and keep my lifestyle. I live alone in a new apartment not far from my previous residence. This site is the culmination of many years of hard labor and a difficult decision. But that decision enabled me to leave my family's shadow and start over on my own terms. My life these days is fairly straightforward. Every morning before leaving for work, I make myself a cup of coffee, turn on some gentle jazz, and sit at the kitchen table to enjoy it. Not many folks stop by. Honestly, I prefer it that way. But finding that tranquility was not simple. I had to go through a night that I will never forget. It all started with what appeared to be a routine phone conversation, but it turned out to be the start of everything. The voice on the other end sounded familiar. The words were brief. However, something about that caused my chest to constrict. I couldn't put it into words at the time, but I knew it was there. Following that call, the house where I grew up began to seem different, like if it no longer belonged to me. It was no longer a location I could return to. It simply became another part of my recollection. I had just returned from the workplace when I received an unexpected call from my mother, Linda Cole. I froze for a while when I saw her name on the screen. It has been a while since I heard from her. Seeing her name made my hand freeze and my mind immediately returned to that afternoon. The day I discreetly packed my belongings and walked out of the house I had lived in for nearly 20 years. I recall it clearly. As I stood at the door, my younger brother Aiden leaned against the fridge, hands in his pockets and gaze turned away. My father, Robert, was seated at the head of the supper table. He added, "If you want to live in this house, you need to fulfill your responsibilities to this family." My mother stood at the sink with her back to me cleaning dishes. She did not turn around. She simply responded gently, "Family stays together. Anyone who leaves is abandoning their blood." Hearing those words from my parents made my chest constrict. It was as if I had taken a step backward in the house where I grew up. The feeling of not being welcomed crept into me, subtle and obvious, without anyone having to say it, and I hadn't heard from them since I left the house. I answered the phone a few seconds after those recollections had passed through me. When I picked up the phone, my mother immediately spoke. Her voice was firm and to the point. She said, "Sean, come home for dinner tonight." I didn't react to her invitation immediately. It was too brief and ambiguous for me to understand what she meant. There was no explanation and no follow-up. Inside, I felt perplexed rather than delighted or angry. My mind was blank for a few seconds, unsure how to process the invitation. I eventually figured it was simply a typical supper. If that's the case, I don't need to have high expectations. Before traveling to my parents' place, I carefully wrapped a loaf of garlic bread I had just cooked, the same one my family would eat before the main course on special occasions. In my brain, I believed that the night would be nice and even comforting. Maybe I'll get to sit beside each of them again, listen to their stories like if I were a child. I had no idea that just a few hours later, the same dinner table would bring me face to face with my family in a way I had never seen before and would never again. When I pulled up in front of the old house, a heavy feeling settled over my chest. This used to be the location I felt I could always come back to. Every night, I hear the familiar voices of my parents and younger brother. I used to think that no matter what occurred, I would be welcome here. But when my mother opened the door, her eyes were calm and she nodded politely. That's when I really understood. The difference between myself and my family was not due to time or place. It was the way they stared at me like I didn't belong here anymore. When I walked inside, everyone was already present in the familiar space. Aiden was at the head of the table. His phone was mounted on a tripod while he adjusted the live feed angle. The sidelight gleamed on his face, and the comments continued non-stop. I stood there for a few seconds watching him before taking my old seat. Dinner had been made with greater care than usual. Meatball pasta, arugula salad, and a bottle of red wine were already poured. From the outside, it seemed like a spectacular occasion, but within, I was anxious. As the lunch began, my parents attempted to break the silence with some typical small conversation. "How's work going? Is the new apartment treating you well?" I responded briefly. Everything felt like a prelude to something bigger. The atmosphere at the table was not calm. It seemed as if everyone was waiting for the ideal moment to reveal their plans. When the main course arrived, my father, Robert, sat up straight, carefully placed his utensils down, and stared directly at me. He spoke clearly. "Eric, your mom, and I think it's time you let Aiden use your apartment for a while." My hand froze above the table as soon as those words left his mouth. Something inside me tensed, but I couldn't tell if it was because of the unexpected request or because he stated it as if it came naturally. After a few seconds, I glanced across at my mother. She did not elevate her head. Her hands rested softly on the table. Nobody looked at me. Nobody appeared surprised or even uncertain. When I did not respond right away, my father continued on. "Aiden needs a quiet space to create content. His work's starting to take off." At that point, I was no longer silent. I remained calm, looked him in the eyes and asked, "Are you serious? That apartment I saved for, I bought it with my own money." That's when his tone shifted. It was no longer calm. His voice became lower and heavier, and he continued, "You've lived in this house for 25 years. It's time you learned to give back to your family." That was not simply a request. It hit like a chilly reminder. They perceived the years I spent growing up in this house as a debt I hadn't fully paid off. I sat quietly and a tight, choking sensation rose in my chest. Those long nights creating code, turning down plans to save on rent, and scurrying amid short layoffs demonstrated how hard I had worked. And now, in their eyes, everything was reduced to a negative balance just because I used to sit at this table as a son who still owed them his portion. After what my father stated, I realized I couldn't remain silent. I was not the youngster who had to give up new toys for his younger sibling. I wasn't the eldest child who was constantly standing aside to protect the family supper from coming apart. I left this town to live on my own terms, and if I remained silent again, I'd be right back in the pattern I'd spent years breaking out of. A few seconds later, I looked my father in the eyes, mustered all of my bravery, and told him the truth. "That apartment is something I worked for myself." "I disagree." After I finished speaking, the air around the table froze. Aiden paused in mid-motion, his eyes wide. My mother flinched slightly, automatically stroking her chin, but said nothing. My father glanced at me, his words low but crisp and decisive. "You dare refuse my request?" Still gazing straight at him, I replied clearly, "Yes. Stop trying to control me." When my father heard me answer no again, he pushed his chair back and stood up. His face was strained and red, and he was holding a full dish of spaghetti. Before I could react, I saw the plate fly directly at me. The tomato sauce soaked my collar, spilled on my face, poured into my hair, and dropped across the table. After the plate struck me, he remained there, breathing heavily, arms down by his sides. He did not move closer. He didn't say another thing. His eyes darted across the table and rested on my mother, as if he was looking for a lifeline in a circumstance he hadn't anticipated. When no one reacted, he straightened his stance, chin slightly up, trying to appear in control. But I could see in his eyes a combination of rage and hurt pride. When that plate struck my face, I didn't hear anything else. The first thing I felt was neither heat nor agony. It was frigid, a peculiar type of cold. Not from the sauce on my flesh, but from the humiliation that seeped into my sense of dignity. That was the first time I'd ever seen my father so enraged. And it was also the first time I realized how blatantly unfair our family could be. There was nothing more to hide. Seconds later, I felt a burst of heat in my chest. It affected me not because I was astonished, but because I had recently been kicked out of my childhood home. Aiden virtually leaped out of his seat after that loud noise. He suddenly turned his phone toward me, his voice full of excitement. "See, told you all the drama in my family's real." I turned and stared at him. His eyes did not flinch. He clearly delighted himself as if he had just recorded the perfect scene for his viewers. I didn't feel rage in that moment. It was a sudden sensation of disappointment. Not because I was being filmed, but because I realized my younger brother didn't even see this as a line that should not be crossed in a family. To him, the humiliation I experienced was simply a source of involvement. Faced with Aiden's callous apathy, my rage erupted in obvious powerful waves. I whirled without warning and slammed his tripod to the ground. The collision resonated dryly and loudly. His phone flew to the side. Aiden jerked back, surprised. I did not let him say anything. I pointed directly into his face and shouted, "You just crossed the line." After everything, my mother sat still, her hand covering her mouth and her eyes avoiding mine. She did not hurry over to intervene or say anything to alleviate the tension in the air. By then, my eyes carried no distinct feeling, only an emptiness rising in my chest, as if the rest of me was slowly separating from this place. And I knew it wasn't over. Aiden bent down to pick up his phone immediately after I knocked the tripod to the ground. He hadn't even swept the dust from the case when his voice pierced through the air, unaffected. "I'm the one supporting this whole house, borrowing your apartment for a while. What's the big deal?" Hearing that made me freeze. I couldn't react. I felt a wave of heat run through my chest, catching in my throat. In that moment, tense and simmering with stress, I turned slowly to gaze at him in the dense, suffocating air of the kitchen I had called home. My gaze was drawn to the younger sibling who I had assumed would always be an essential member of our family. And simply looking at him brought up such crisp and vivid memories that it was unsettling. I recall Aiden dropping out of college and declaring his desire to be a TikToker. My parents did not object. Instead, they provided him with all of the necessary equipment, including cameras, lighting, and microphones, as well as encouragement. "It's good he's learning to make money early." I recall when a handful of his videos went popular and the entire house cheered as if we had won the lottery. My mom informed her pals, "Aiden is more practical than his older brother, who just dreams all day." I remembered Aiden was the one who took them on their first vacation, and from that moment on, every eye in the house shifted in one direction. And I scraped together month after month to make payments on that flat. Every time I mentioned moving out, they dismissed it since they believed I was still doing the right thing by sending money home on a regular basis. All those recollections of injustice and obvious stupid imbalance erupted in my throat like a lump, intensifying with each breath. It felt as if everything I'd never dared to say was now sitting there, pressing my chest and daring me to speak up. Finally, as I stood immobile, the thick tomato sauce seeping into my collar, a familiar voice emerged from behind me. "What's going on here?" The sound of that voice caused the entire kitchen to freeze. Everyone focused on the back door. Walter Cole, my grandfather, was standing right there. At 77, he still kept his back straight and his gaze sharp. He had just returned from a hiking trip with his retired buddies in Oregon. Nobody in the family had anticipated him to walk in at that precise time. His gaze scanned the room before settling on my grandson, who was coated in tomato sauce and had always been the most difficult for him. My collar rumpled and food clung to my shirt. He didn't say anything, just frowned his brow slightly. When my father spotted him, he had a look of discomfort in his eyes, as if he had just been caught doing something he knew couldn't be explained away. But almost instantly, he gathered himself and attempted to regain control, speaking in his familiar, forceful tone. "You see that?" He disrespected me, wouldn't listen, and he nearly broke Aiden's live stream setup. Before my grandfather could react, my mother stepped in with an angry tone. "He just knocked over Aiden's phone. Who knows what else he would have done if I hadn't stepped in." However, my grandfather did not react to any of it. He walked directly to my side. He took a handkerchief from his jacket pocket and gently wiped the tomato sauce off my face in a calm hush that was almost as loud as their shouting. He didn't say anything, but I knew his motion meant he'd had enough. After folding the handkerchief back into place, he looked me in the eyes and asked in his steady, deep voice, "Eric, tell me what happened." I did not hesitate. I responded immediately because for as long as I could remember, he was the one person of the family who I truly believed would listen all the way through. He never interrupted, minimized, or forced me to follow his rules. Respect, he believed, was not determined by age or hierarchy. It was earned via fairness. I kept my breath calm and told him everything clearly and without hyperbole. I didn't need to emphasize the point. I knew he'd comprehend the rest. When I finished, he stood still for a few seconds. His face did not change. Then, after a brief pause, he turned to face my father and remarked calmly but firmly, "Robert, apologize to him." My father responded with a frigid smirk, a disdain. "And your old dad? Just relax and stay out of this." After that rude response, my grandfather's face did not flinch. But I could feel the fire of his rage held behind those eyes, which were now fixed on my father. A few seconds later, he turned to face the entire dining table. His eyes remained steady, and his voice was low, yet firm enough to rock the room. He declared, "This house is still under my name. If none of you see what's wrong here, if no one feels the need to apologize, pack your things and get out." The subsequent silence in the kitchen was dense and heavy. I looked at Aiden. His head was lowered, his fingers twirling the phone in his palms. He said nothing. My mother stared at the floor, her hands clutched in her lap. My father looked to the side, avoiding everything. While everyone sat still, I could hear my heartbeat slowing and heavy in my chest. And at that moment, I realized I wasn't alone anymore. A new line has been drawn smack in the middle of what was previously known as family. My father sprang up from his seat immediately following the long pause. His cheeks reddened with rage, and he yelled, "You're kicking your son out over him?" Still calm, my granddad responded, "I gave you the chance to apologize. You didn't take it." He paused for a beat before turning to face me. His look was slow yet strong, as if he was considering a decision more important than rage. Then, in a calm and unwavering voice, he gazed around the room at each of them, saying, "You want him to give up his apartment? Fine, the three of you live there. This house stays with him." The statements felt like a definitive verdict. No appeals. There is no discussion. My father's expression was one of shock. His lips stiffened, his eyes expanded. With clenched teeth, he hissed, "You can't do that. This is my house, mine." My mother also sprang up from her chair, her worry palpable. Her voice broke and she almost cried out, "Dad, this is too much. What will people think about our family?" I looked across at Aiden. He didn't say anything. He just looked from Dad to Mom, then at our grandfather. His eyes were lost, as if he was silently pleading for someone to intervene but didn't know where to look. I did not move. I just stood there. Something inside my chest broke open. It was not fulfilling. It was not about winning. It was because for once my grandfather stood up for me without asking me to prove it. My grandfather's face hardened as he witnessed the reactions around him. He didn't yell, but I could feel the intensity of his rage swelling beneath that quiet reserve. He turned and walked to the cabinet at the front door. Nobody dared to speak. Nobody dared to stop him. The room was so quiet that I could hear the slight squeak of the hinge as he opened the door. He held 3 jackets. My father's brown jacket, my mother's blue coat, and Aiden's familiar black hoodie. He threw them out onto the front steps without saying anything more. Slow and deliberate. There are no explanations or drama, only action. The front door remained open. A breeze blew in, bearing the frigid sensation of something that had recently been evicted from this dwelling. When he spun around, he was firmly in the center of the room. His gaze locked on all 3 of them, and his voice became even lower. I may be old, but I'm still clear-headed, and I know right from wrong. He then said without raising his voice, "No one gets to take my grandson's home and expect him to thank you for it." After those comments, my father stood immobile. His fists clenched so tightly that his knuckles turned white. My mother kept her head down, fingers close together, and gaze fixed on the floor as if she was trying to disappear. The only sound in the room was a mild wind blowing through the open door. I remained where I was, staring at the man who had accomplished something I had never imagined possible. A surge erupted in my chest, not from emotion, but from the peaceful, strange sensation of finally being valued in this house. And at that point, I understood the old door in front of us didn't suddenly swing open, forcing someone out. It also opened up something new in this household. When confronted with my grandfather's hard stance, I witnessed my father falter. His face remained rigid with stress, but the fire in his eyes had faded. He took a step back, fists still clenched and lips parted as if to protest, but no words came out. Before he could say anything, my grandfather's voice cut in abruptly and definitively, leaving no opportunity for interruption. Still staring directly at me, he said clearly, "Eric, go back to your apartment, pack a few things, then come back here." I didn't say anything. I nodded and moved silently out of the kitchen. It felt like walking out of a courtroom without a judge or a jury, but with a verdict based solely on what was right. My head was whirling as I drove back to my flat. Every length of road seemed to echo with that plate crashing down. The sensation of sauce on my clothes, Aiden's averted stare, and my parents' voices looping through my thoughts as if they were attempting to resurface old memories. My chest still felt heavy despite the fact that the person who stood up for me was the most respected voice in the family. And I knew this because my father would only raise his voice when Grandpa wasn't present. Because my granddad is not easily swayed. He was a soldier who trained thousands of troops, fought on real battlefields, and confronted death without hesitation. In my eyes and the eyes of everyone in the coal line, his word is more important than any judicial verdict. And just now, with the property and house still in his name, no matter how loud my father yelled, he had to realize he was standing on ground that no longer followed the old laws. But while I was packing a few items in my modest flat, I had no idea that everything was already in motion back at home. Not with emotion, but with the law. My grandfather's attorney, Thomas Moore, arrived shortly after I departed. At Grandpa's request, he brought 2 copies of past wills and a newly created paper and pushed them through. If my father, mother, and Aiden did not evacuate the house within 72 hours, I would get entire authority and ownership of it. No arguments. There are no negotiations. Every syllable of protest was duly recorded. They were asked to pack all personal belongings within the specified time range. Any delay would be considered a civil infraction as specified by Thomas in the property agreements. Because once my grandfather speaks, everything revolves around the moral code that has guided his entire life. And when I finally closed the door to my flat, the quietness seemed eerie, almost too calm. At the time, I wasn't sure if I just stepped out of a conflict or into the opening stage of something far larger. But I knew one thing for certain. This was not over. Not even close. I stood in the center of the living room. The air felt thick, as if a coating of dust had settled over everything. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved from their seat. On the customary table, a set of keys was carefully put in front of my dad. According to my grandfather's choice, They were the keys to my flat where my family would temporarily live. Grandpa stated unequivocally that the apartment must stay unchanged. Nothing was to be removed, amended, or updated without his approval. With attorney Thomas Moore present, each condition was properly documented. My parents and younger brother had to relocate from their 2,500 square foot house in West Grove Township to a 550 square foot apartment with only one bedroom and a small kitchen. I understood the flat wasn't particularly luxurious. The walls had not been repainted since the previous round of repairs. The kitchen range hood was unreliable and the central air conditioner could only cool one section at a time. But it was the result of 4 years spent preserving a sign of my independence. They would find it difficult to share such a small space, not even close. That night, after my parents and younger brother had officially departed the Cole household, I sat alone in the kitchen. The fragrance of tomato sauce lingered in the air, a persistent trace that couldn't be removed. I looked over to my granddad and quietly asked, "You did all this for what?" He lifted his head and responded slowly with a distant gaze as if reaching back for something long ago. "I just wanted your father to understand the value of fairness." His response left me speechless, not because it astonished me, but because for the first time I detected a hint of sorrow in his voice. He informed me that the distance between him and my father had only grown after spending so many years away from home in the military. My late grandma, his wife, had been nice but overly indulgent. My father grew up in a world without many boundaries. With a serene, almost disconcerting stability in his eyes, he said, "It wasn't until tonight, after staying silent for too long, that I truly saw what he did to you at dinner was unacceptable." He waited for a moment before adding one crisp, strong line. I felt a sentence settle deep into my chest. To me, real love and fairness have to go hand in hand. A father who doesn't teach his child where the line is, no matter how much he loves them, is still harmful. Hearing him say that made me realize something undeniable. My granddad never resented my father. He still felt a profound, enduring love for him. However, that affection was no longer delivered in the form of nice pats on the back or warm encouragements. It had changed into something firmer, something unshakable. A quiet but firm form of correction fashioned by limits, discipline, and judgments that cause people to pause and actually consider. It was not punishment. The course correction was late but necessary. After what he told me, I no longer saw him as the family's head. He changed into something very different. A last distinction between what is correct and what is easy. He hadn't just fixed one hectic dinner. It was about realigning a route that had deviated for far too long. I'm not sure what will happen next, but I know my family has reached a point where no one can pretend not to see. Following that day, I formally returned to the old house with Grandpa. No more calm dinners in a small apartment. No more long pauses between four blank walls. But I knew it wasn't the end. The next thing Grandpa asked me to do made me hesitate. A week after they moved in, my apartment was posted for sale at a 5% discount from market value. It was not a simple decision, but Grandpa made it plain that this was not punishment. It was a clean cut, breaking the cord that had bound me to a version of the past I had outgrown. 2 days after the listing went public, a young, educated couple arrived to see it. They made an offer and signed the paperwork the same day. Then followed what we'd both expected. My mother looked perplexed when the purchasers arrived at my apartment with legal documents and an official move-out notice. Aiden struggled to maintain his composure. However, when they discovered it was true, my father, Robert, completely lost control. He appeared outside Grandpa's house, slamming both fists on the front door, his voice ringing down the street, cheeks flushed with rage. He shouted through the wooden door, "Eric, you ungrateful little bastard, turning on your own family. You're trying to steal my house and throw me out on the street." But it did not end there. He returned to his car, opened the trunk, and took out a red gas can. His hands trembled, but his eyes remained rigid and wild. In a panic, he yelled, "If you don't leave my house, I'll burn it all down. Don't push me." His shouting echoed across the neighborhood. People stepped out of their homes. Some began filming. Within minutes, video clips had made their way into the neighborhood group chat. Inside, I stood by Grandpa. He said nothing. He only glanced at the door. I saw no anger in his eyes. Not even disappointment, just a deep weariness. The expression of a father who has never heard his son say, "I'm sorry." A few seconds later, in a low and calm voice, he turned to me, placed his hand on my shoulder and said, "From now on, I'm passing this to you." Being trusted like that made every muscle in my body tense. Not out of fear, but because I knew I couldn't stay still. I quickly called the police to report an emergency. 2 patrol cars and 2 fire trucks arrived. They detained my father, took the gas can from his hands, and led him away past hundreds of people watching from doorways, some still holding their phones up. However, that wasn't the worst part. We didn't realize that, throughout the outburst, Aiden had surreptitiously pushed his phone up against the car and began live streaming. There was no warning. There was no attempt to halt it. He simply stood behind the screen, photographing everything like a director capturing a live broadcast in frame. My father was pacing the sidewalk, cursing, swearing, pulling the top off the gas can, and threatening to burn everything down. Aiden did not step in. I did not look away. He adjusted the angle to keep Dad in the center, his gaze fixed on the screen as if watching the viewer count increase by the second. He seemed chilly and concentrated. Not anger. Do not be afraid. Just a terrifying intensity, as if he were shooting the ideal viral moment. Within an hour, the replay had swept over social media. Some video clips showed my father raising the gas can. Others played dramatic music while he screamed that if he was kicked out, he would burn everything. The comments poured in, some indignant, some laughing, some stunned, but almost all agreed on one point: that behavior was unacceptable. Then something unexpected began to unfold. My father's reputation was ruined by more than just the live stream. His son broadcasted it. Aiden broke the family's remaining limits with a single deed, not for the sake of truth, but to express one's opinion. I realized then that this wasn't just about one individual anymore. This was now the story of a family opening up to the world. It was irreversible. After the cops left, the house went completely silent. I leaned against the doorway, not sure what to say. At the far end of the room, Grandpa sat at his desk, his gaze riveted on the computer screen. I played back Aiden's livestream video from just hours before. Dad yelled. The gas hit the concrete, and his face contorted in wrath. I moved closer, but Grandpa did not glance up. He simply shook his head slightly and murmured in a voice I'll never forget. He destroyed his son's life, and your father may not have a way back anymore. I didn't respond. I stayed there for a few more seconds trying to persuade myself that what we'd just seen had actually occurred. Before we had a chance to analyze the legal documents filed by Grandpa's attorney, which included property control, obligatory relocation, and inheritance modifications, another shift occurred, and this time it wasn't from us. The state of California formally intervened after threatening to use a flammable material to damage others and private property with a live-streamed video serving as public evidence. The Sacramento County District Attorney's Office issued a notice that a criminal investigation had been launched against my father, Robert Cole. The complaint did not originate from me, Grandpa, or anyone in the family. It came from the prosecutor's office on behalf of Californians. In the documents given to the residents, I read the following line: "The people of the state of California versus Robert Cole. Only one video, only one irresponsible behavior was witnessed by hundreds." My father, who had been running a modest machine shop for more than 2 decades, was suddenly facing a criminal case. The charge was felony criminal threat with a maximum punishment of 3 years in prison or prolonged probation with a permanent restraining order. Grandpa received a complete copy of the case file, as well as a formal summons to testify as the legal property owner whose safety and valuables were under jeopardy. And because I was present during the incident, I was called to give sworn testimony in court. I didn't feel relieved as I folded the subpoena and peered out the window where the neighbor's porch light was still visible through the foliage and over our fence. I did not feel angry either. Only one thing remained apparent in my chest. Nothing would ever be the same again after this. and my family had reached a point where there was no longer room for pretense or compromise. My mother visited Grandpa's house. She did not call ahead. She just knocked gently and waited. When I answered the door, she said nothing to me. She entered the living room where Grandpa was reviewing documents with his attorney, Thomas. She remained there calmly for a few seconds before bowing her head, voice breaking. "Please save my husband." "I'm sorry, Dad." Grandpa did not flinch. He did not answer immediately. He closed the file in front of him, took off his glasses, and stared straight at her. His speech was quiet and deliberate, with each syllable landing like a pin into motionless air. "I am not the one who put him in this position. If you want to plead, plead with your spouse, the man who stood in the yard with a gas can, threatening to burn down his own father's house. Please speak with your other son who has turned our family into bait for views. Finally, if you still have a conscience, go plead with the son you used as a punchline for 27 years. She then broke down. Not loud, just little stuttering sobs, as if someone realized something they couldn't undo. She didn't respond, did not beg. She merely bowed, turned aside, and walked out of the house as if she had no place to stay. And I understood right then that my family was no longer whole in every sense of the word. At the criminal court, my father was sentenced to supervised probation and a no-contact order. He was not allowed to come within 300 feet of either me or Grandpa, effective immediately. There was no jail time, but the court made it clear that if he reoffended in any way during the next 2 years, his sentence would be upgraded to prison. Aiden faced no criminal charges, but his live webcast rapidly became a lightning point for public criticism. TikTok formally deleted his account, citing a violation of digital broadcasting standards. 2 more platforms followed suit, withdrawing any ad deals associated with his identity. The court never ruled on it, but society has its own way of delivering verdicts. Aiden lost everything he'd built, and perhaps for the first time, he grasped something I had been dealing with for years. Being in front of a camera does not equal power. Sometimes it's the quickest method to strip naked. I did not smile when I learned the news. I did not feel relieved. I simply closed my phone, sat beside Grandpa, and made him a cup of tea. The house was silent as it is every morning. There is no remaining noise, just enough room for 2 people, a steady breath, and something unusual. Something I hadn't felt in a long time. I could finally exist without needing to diminish myself in order to be permitted to. And for me, that was enough. And today, exactly 1 year after leaving that dinner table in a tomato sauce-soaked blouse, I signed the papers for a new apartment. It's not much larger, but it's brighter, more comfortable, and still close to where I used to reside. My father currently lives in a little house on the outskirts of town. He sticks to himself, avoids his neighbors, and has not been on any platform since. He is halfway through his probation and attends court-mandated behavioral counseling sessions on a regular basis. My mother lives with him in that calm place. She doesn't speak out and hasn't reached out. But after all, I believe she has now begun to reflect on the decisions she once made and the price the entire family paid for a few seconds of stillness. Aiden disappeared from social media after losing all of his income. His previous videos were removed and brands ceased using his name. I'm not sure how he makes a living now, and honestly, I don't care as much as I used to. Only Grandpa lives in the ancient house. I visit him once a week. We drink tea, care for the garden, replace light bulbs, and paint the fence. He speaks less than he used to, but I know he's still keeping an eye on everything, not with words, but by keeping the house clean and how he always arranges 3 cups on the table. 1 for him, 1 for me, and 1 is left empty, as if he's still waiting for someone even though he's not sure if they'll ever return. After all of this, I'd like to leave you with this. Not everyone in your family will support you. However, this does not imply you must continue to put up with it. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is choose to protect yourself rather than keep the peace, even if it means giving up your sense of belonging. It's worth it since being true to yourself is always lighter than living to please others. That is the end of my story. And before I finish this chapter, I'd like to question those of you who have been with me throughout this journey. Do you think my grandfather was too harsh on my parents and brother? I would love to hear your thoughts. Please share your thoughts in the comments section. Now on to the next story. Story 4. My boyfriend uninvited me from his sister's wedding to take his girl best friend instead. But I'm going anyway. For starters, I love my boyfriend's family. What I don't love is his girl best friend. My boyfriend has been friends with this girl since childhood and admits that he was in love with her for years. But she just kept stringing him along. She would flirt with him, say things like, "But can you imagine if we were together? That would be amazing." They made marriage pacts and things like that, but she would always get a boyfriend and friend-zone him. This cycle of flirting when she was single and acting like they were just friends when she had a boyfriend continued all through college until he met me. I've only met his girl best friend a few times because she lives in another state, but every time has been unpleasant. She's insufferable and thinks everything between us is a competition. Who knows him better? Who would make a better wife? Like, why are you even thinking that? It's so weird. But somehow, it always comes back to who is closer to his family. She constantly talks about how his mom is like a second mother to her and how she really feels like part of the family. Okay, cool. Not sure what to say to that. About a week ago, my boyfriend's sister's wedding invitation arrived addressed to him, but it included a +1. Obviously, that +1 was for me. We've been dating for years. It was expected, or so I thought. In the first few days after receiving the invitation, he was talking about plans, flights for the wedding, and so on. But after a few days, he stopped mentioning the wedding. If I brought it up, he would change the subject. 2 days ago, I got home and my boyfriend was in the bedroom on speakerphone with someone. I would recognize that wheezy, nasally voice anywhere. It was his girl best friend. She was talking about what she should wear to the wedding, which I didn't find out at first. She always says how close she is to his family, so I assumed she'd be invited. I walked into the bedroom and greeted her on the phone. He looked startled, which was weird because I had greeted her on speaker before and it was never a problem. I told her I was looking forward to seeing her at the wedding, which was a lie, but I was trying to be polite. Tell me why this girl responds, "Oh, I'm so glad you got your own invitation." I was starting to feel bad about taking your +1. Taking my +1? What? My boyfriend quickly told her he had to go, and I just stood there with my arms crossed waiting for an explanation. He told me she didn't receive an invitation to the wedding. Shocking, considering how close she claims to be with his family. He said she called him all upset, saying it would mean everything to her to go to the wedding and celebrate with the people she loves most. The people she loves most, yet she wasn't even invited. I told him it was really strange that he would choose someone other than his girlfriend as his +1 for his own sister's wedding. He said that since they've known her forever, it wouldn't be that weird. I was like, well, she wasn't invited. And he had the nerve to say, neither were you. I was stunned. I told him that +1 was clearly meant for me. I've talked to his sister about her wedding multiple times. Just because my name wasn't on it doesn't mean it wasn't for me. And he said, well, your name isn't there, so I can choose who I want to take, and I'm taking my friend. I stormed out and went to my best friend's house crying and telling her everything. I felt so embarrassed. I know I shouldn't feel that way, but how could he not even want me there? Then I got an unexpected call from his sister. She told me my boyfriend had called her to explain the situation, and she was furious. She said the +1 was obviously for me and apologized, saying she was trying to save on customization costs but would have put my name if she knew he'd pull something like this. She was sorry if it seemed like I wasn't welcome. The best part? She started talking about his girl best friend and said, there's absolutely no way I'm letting that leech into my wedding. She told me their entire family despises this girl because she strung my boyfriend along for years, is rude, selfish, and ungrateful. Every time she was at their house, she made a mess and never cleaned up. She said they intentionally didn't invite her. The girl lies saying she's close to the family, but they don't even talk to her. His sister told me she revoked my boyfriend's +1 and would be sending me my own invitation. She even said that if I decided to break up with my boyfriend over this, she'd still love to have me at the wedding because she feels like I'm already part of the family. How the tables have turned. So now I know I'll be at that wedding, whether I go with my boyfriend or not. That's still up for debate. I got home exhausted, still trying to process everything that had happened. I was still surprised by the call from my boyfriend's sister and knowing she was on my side. But as I was packing my things, I heard the door slam open. My boyfriend stormed into the apartment with a look on his face that I had never seen before. He looked furious. His eyes narrowed, and there was a threatening energy in the air. "Where's the invitation?" he snapped without even saying hello. I froze in the middle of the room, holding a suitcase that I had started to fill with my clothes. "What invitation?" I asked, though I knew exactly what he was talking about. "Don't play dumb. My sister sent you an invitation, right? You're going to give it to me." "It's for my best friend," he said, stepping closer, his tone growing harsher with every word. I felt cornered. I knew this conversation wasn't going to end well, but I never imagined he would take it this far. "That invitation is mine and you know it. Your sister was very clear about it. She even canceled your +1. I tried to explain, my voice already starting to tremble. He laughed, but it wasn't a laugh of humor. It was cruel, as if he were mocking me. "Of course she said that. She likes you. But don't you get it? The person who really matters here is my best friend. Do you think she'll forgive me if I don't take her? I already promised her she'd come with me. Hand over the invitation and stop being selfish." He held out his hand, expecting me to obey. At that moment, I felt the tears starting to stream down my face. I was hurt, but also filled with anger. How could he treat me like this? How could he choose someone who had manipulated and used him for years over me, someone who had always been by his side? Selfish. My voice cracked at first, but I took a deep breath and continued. "You think I'm selfish? You're defending someone who used you like a toy for years. She led you on, put you in the friend zone, and disappeared every time she got a new boyfriend. And now you want me to give her something that's mine? What right do you think you have?" He didn't respond immediately. He just stared at me with a cold expression, like he didn't recognize me anymore. And then he exploded. "You don't understand anything. She's important to me. She always has been. Maybe you're the one who's wrong here. Maybe you're not as special as you think. If you really loved me, you'd do this for me without question," he shouted, his voice echoing through the apartment. That was the final straw. My heart shattered completely. I couldn't stay there any longer, couldn't keep fighting for someone who clearly didn't value me. With trembling hands, I grabbed the invitation from the table and handed it to him. "Here, if this is what you want, take it. And take her too, because I'm not going to stay here and watch you throw away everything we had for someone who never respected you." My voice was low but firm. I knew there was no turning back. I picked up my suitcase and walked to the door. He didn't try to stop me. Not a word. He just stood there holding the invitation like he had won some kind of battle. I walked out without looking back, crying so much that I could barely see the road ahead. I arrived at his sister's house hours later. She opened the door, and the moment she saw me, she knew something was wrong. She invited me in, and as soon as I sat on the couch, I broke down. I told her everything that had happened. Every cruel word, every unfair decision. She listened in silence, but I could see the anger building in her eyes. "He did what?" she finally asked, her voice full of outrage. "He demanded that you give the invitation to that leech, and you gave it to him?" "I did," I admitted, my voice weak. "I couldn't fight anymore. He doesn't respect me, doesn't value me. If she means that much to him, let them be together. I'm done." She shook her head in disbelief. "This is unacceptable. You did everything right and he treated you like this. He's an idiot, and I'm going to fix this right now." She stood up, grabbed her phone, and started typing furiously. I watched her, confused. A few minutes later, she turned to me with a determined smile. "I just canceled their invitations. Neither of them will be at my wedding. And you know what? You deserve so much more than this. You deserve to be there holding your head high, because you're part of this family now." "They're not." I didn't know what to say. For the first time that night, I felt valued and understood. She continued, "You are amazing. Don't let anyone make you feel otherwise, especially my idiot brother. And if you need a place to stay, this house is yours. I won't let you go through this alone." The tears came back, but this time they weren't from sadness. I hugged her tightly, grateful to have someone by my side. Maybe the end of that relationship was just the beginning of something better. I didn't know what the future held, but in that moment, I felt strong enough to face anything. The big day finally arrived. I was nervous but determined. I looked at myself in the mirror one last time before leaving. The dress fit me perfectly, and the makeup was subtle but highlighted my confidence. I didn't want to seem like I was there to compete with anyone, but I also wasn't going to let anyone make me feel small. His sister had sent me a message saying she was excited to see me, and that gave me strength. I took a deep breath and left. When I arrived at the venue, I was greeted with warm hugs. His entire family welcomed me as if nothing had happened. His mother was the first to greet me. "I'm so glad you came, dear. You've always been like a daughter to me." She hugged me sincerely, and I felt the weight of the past days lift. They led me to a well-placed table surrounded by family and close friends. Laughter flowed naturally and the joy was contagious. It was his sister's day, and nothing should ruin it. Everything was perfect until suddenly, I felt the atmosphere shift. Discreet glances started turning toward the entrance. I followed their gaze and there he was, my ex, dressed formally but with an uncomfortable expression, as if he knew he wasn't welcome. He looked around, maybe searching for support, but all he found were cold and indifferent stares. His best friend wasn't there. He was alone. Curious, I discreetly approached one of the bride's uncles and asked why he was there. "We decided to let him stay," the uncle whispered, his expression serious. "If we kicked him out, it could cause an unnecessary scene. Today is his sister's day, and he's not going to ruin it." I nodded slightly, understanding. But shortly after, someone from the family approached him. It was the bride's brother. He went straight to him but spoke in a low voice to avoid drawing attention. "What are you doing here? You weren't invited. And where's that leech you call your best friend?" He lowered his gaze, uncomfortable, and muttered something, but those nearby managed to hear him. "She didn't want to come. She said she was going out with another friend." His voice was barely audible. The entire table stifled laughter. The irony was too obvious. He had been deceived and replaced again. That best friend he ruined our relationship for chose to go out with another guy instead of being with him. Someone murmured, "Serves him right. You reap what you sow." We pretended nothing was happening, but his humiliation was clear. He stayed there, uncomfortable, isolated, with no one to talk to. He had no place among us anymore. Every shared smile, every knowing glance from the family made him shrink even more. After the ceremony, during the reception, his sister, the bride, approached him. The soft smile she had worn all day was gone. "Do you have any idea what you did?" She spoke quietly, but her tone was firm. "You lost the best person who's ever been in your life, and you still had the nerve to show up here after everything?" He tried to justify himself, but she raised her hand, cutting him off. "No, you've said enough. From now on, you're no longer part of my life." "She is." She pointed proudly at me. "And you better accept it." I watched the scene from a distance. I didn't feel sorry for him. I felt relieved. At that moment, any remaining connection between us was completely broken. The rest of the night was light and fun. I danced, talked, and laughed with everyone. His mother hugged me again before I left. "I want you to know that this will always be your family, no matter what." In that moment, I realized I didn't need him anymore. I never did. His family accepted me for who I was, and he chose his path. I moved on, stronger, more confident, and surrounded by people who truly cared about me. Time passed, as it always does, and the pain that once felt unbearable slowly began to fade. At first, I still carried the weight of everything that had happened. The humiliation, the anger, the disappointment. But over time, I realized that none of that defined me. It wasn't the end of my story, just the closing of a chapter that desperately needed to end. After the wedding, I stayed at his sister's house for a while. She welcomed me with a kindness I never expected. In fact, the entire family continued treating me with warmth, as if nothing had changed. And in a way, something had changed. I finally understood the true value of the people around me who genuinely respected me. His mother, always a sweet and understanding woman, would call me from time to time just to check on me. She never tried to justify her son's behavior or pressure me in any way. She simply said how sorry she was for everything that happened and that I deserved so much better. As for him, well, the last I heard about him was through a mutual friend. After the embarrassment he suffered at his sister's wedding, he became isolated from his own family. His sister cut him off completely, and even his mother, deeply disappointed, distanced herself. He tried to reconnect with his so-called best friend, but, unsurprisingly, she had already moved on to another guy as usual. They say he tried dating after that, but nothing ever lasted, maybe because he never learned how to truly value the people who stood by him. And her, his best friend, from what I heard, she remained exactly the same, jumping from friend to friend, from man to man, maintaining shallow relationships, always chasing attention. It seems like she never matured, and maybe she never will. People like her tend to live in a never-ending cycle, constantly searching for something they can't even define. As for me, I decided to rebuild myself. I started investing more in myself, in my career, in my studies. I went out with friends, traveled, visited places I had always wanted to see. And of course, at some point, someone new came into my life. It wasn't sudden or like something out of a movie. It felt natural. I met Daniel at a work event. He was nothing like anyone I had met before. Kind, respectful, and most importantly, honest. There were no games, no insecurities, no competition. With him, I felt safe from the very beginning. There was no anxiety to impress him, no fear of being left behind. He saw me for who I truly was. Over time, we grew closer. Our conversations flowed easily, and the connection between us was something I didn't even know was possible. Daniel respected my space, my opinions, my time. He wasn't perfect, nobody is, but he was someone who knew the value of a healthy relationship. And that's exactly what we built, a real partnership. I remember one day, during a casual conversation, I ended up telling him a bit about my past with my ex. I didn't go into details. I didn't need to. Daniel listened attentively and said something I'll never forget. The past doesn't define who you are now, but it prepared you to recognize who truly deserves to be by your side. And he was right. Today, when I look back, I don't feel anger or resentment. Everything that happened had to happen for me to finally recognize my own worth. I wasn't the one who needed to change, and I wasn't the one who was wrong. I was simply in the wrong place with the wrong person. His sister got married, and it was a beautiful ceremony. I still keep in touch with her to this day. We message each other from time to time and have even gone out for coffee. My relationship with his family became something natural, without the heaviness it once carried. They moved on with their lives, and so did I, and that's how life went on. I moved on wiser, stronger, and above all happier, because I learned that love isn't about one-sided sacrifice. Love is about respect, care, and reciprocity. And that's exactly what I found. Now on to the next story. Story 5. My girlfriend is planning to move in with me with her 4 children, but she told me that she doesn't like my daughter as the queen of the house. So I kicked her to the curb. My daughter, Stacy, has one of the 2 rooms in my house with an in-it bathroom. It's a largish room with a nice bay window, obviously very nice. I've recently become engaged to my girlfriend of 3 years, Alice, and her landlord has recently hiked her rent, so we're planning to have her move in with me. She has some kids. She has 2 daughters and 2 sons. She's also pregnant, and our daughter is due in about 5 months. I've made it absolutely clear to my daughter, as a condition of getting her approval on moving my girlfriend in, that she is allowed to keep her room and she's also allowed to have a full lock on her door. My daughter plans to go to school locally, and I have told her in no uncertain terms that she's welcome to live at home for the rest of my life, and after that she can inherit the house. I bought the house with her mother and paid it off in large part with her mother's life insurance 10 years ago, so it only seems fair. She says she's all right as long as she has her room and bathroom and is allowed to put a lock on her door. Stacy will be giving up a room she's currently using as a studio project space. She does art videos, voiceovers, etc., so even her larger room will become a bit more cramped, and she'll definitely need the extra space she has. There will be a bedroom for Alice's girls, Stacy's old project room, and Alice's boys, who will be getting an older room. I will be putting in a finished nursery bedroom in the basement for our new daughter. Alice thinks that this is unfair. She thinks it was wrong of me to decide without her, and she also thinks that she should move her two daughters into Stacy's room and that Stacy should have to move to the smaller room they'll be getting. The two of them already share a smaller room than the one I'm moving them into, so they're getting an upgrade regardless. Alice thinks that it's not fair for Stacy to have a bathroom all day herself and that there won't be enough bathrooms for everyone else. She also disapproves of Stacy being able to lock everyone out. There were other smaller things she didn't like that I agreed to with Stacy, like the fact that she is to be paid for any babysitting or that my older car, her mom's old car, is hers when she gets her driver's license. We'll have our own bathroom in the master bedroom, and the house has 3 other bathrooms besides, one on each floor, one near what will be her girls' room, one not far from what will be the boys' room, and one little basically be directly next to the newly finished room. I told Alice that my deal with Stacy is non-negotiable, set in stone, and that it's literally a condition of her even moving in. Alice is upset that Stacy and I have spaces completely dedicated to ourselves. I have my office, which I need because I work from home and have projects besides, and there aren't many other spaces to put people. I told her she could pretty much do what she wanted in the living room, but that it is what it was and there was pretty much nothing to be done about it. A bigger house is not an option unless Alice is going to start making a hell of a lot more money and buy her own bigger house. It's already a pretty big house and housing is expensive. I told her that she was already getting a break by my only expecting her to contribute 15 or 20% to household bills. If we were doing it proportionately, it would be more like 25% to 30%. We keep separate finances and we've agreed to eat up. Alice just seems upset that I won't change the setup even though there's no real way to change it. And she's accused me of treating Stacy like a spoiled little princess and letting her be queen of the house. Frankly, my daughter comes first. She's lived here all her life, and I already know it will be a big adjustment having all these other kids move in. As much as I love Alice and as much as I want our relationship to work out, if it's a matter of choosing between the two of them, then my relationship with Alice is a sacrifice I'm willing to make. I've told her that if she comes into this with wicked stepmother vibes, then that'll be the end of things. She thinks I'm being unreasonable. It was Friday, and Stacy texted me asking for her allowance. I was with Alice then, and I went ahead and let the subject come up. I give Stacy $100 a week. Alice thinks that this is crazy and excessive. She thinks it's improper and brought it up as an example of how she thinks I'm raising Stacy like a spoiled princess. She said as much again when I told her I was sending Stacy her allowance. But this time Alice also asked if her kids would get the same allowance after we get married. I told her that someday our new daughter would probably get an allowance just like Stacy does, but that there was no way I had any plans of shelling out an extra $400 a week for her other kids. Alice got upset. She said that Stacy wasted my money on shoes and makeup. She has previously criticized Stacy for wearing fancy sneakers, high heels, and makeup, and she said that I was knowing favoritism and that that is a form of abuse. She complained about me letting Stacy buy things with my credit card and store my credit card on her phone when I didn't even let Alice do that. She said that whatever money would go to the kids should be split evenly amongst them. When I shrugged and told her that that wasn't going to happen and that I wasn't going to cut Stacy's allowance, she snapped at me. She said that a man living alone with his daughter and doting on her like I do is creepy and incestuous. And she said, "You've just replaced your dead wife with your daughter and you need to stop." That was it. Sure, I've ignored many red flags until now, but that was it. She started trying to tell me about how it was unhealthy for me to be so close with Stacy, how she didn't want her kids to be neglected, and how she wanted to be treated as an equal if we were getting married still. I interrupted her and I told her that I didn't think we should be getting married. I told her that I didn't want her moving in and that we would need to work something else out. To be perfectly honest, my sister, my brother, and some of my friends have expressed some of the same misgivings about Alice that I've read, although they were generally much more gentle about it. I was in love with her. In fact, I'm still in love with her, and I wasn't seeing things clearly. I told her that I would always make sure that our child had a roof over her head, but that she was going to have to work something out for herself and her kids on her own. Obviously, we had a huge fight. She screamed at me. She called me a heartless bastard. She blamed Stacy for trying to sabotage our relationship. She guilt-tripped me about her cost of living and how I was in an empty house all by myself. She also guilt-tripped me about the stress on the baby, and I actually do feel bad and worry about that. She eventually broke down crying and told me to leave. In the past 10 years, this was my first relationship with a woman that became serious. I love her and this hurts. It hurts a hell of a lot. I told Stacy that she didn't have to bother moving her stuff out of the other room and that Alice wasn't coming. And we hugged. She asked if this was her fault, and I told her no. I told her I honestly feel like marrying Alice would have been a mistake even if the two of them could have been best buddies. I always wanted to have a few more kids and missed having a wife, but things don't always happen the way we want. So I'm pretty sure my relationship with Alice is effectively over, even if we're raising a child together for the foreseeable future. I'm not sorry to be having another kid, even if I really wish the circumstances could be better. The red flags were always there. I guess it's better that I notice them now instead of later. After ending my relationship with Alice, life at home returned to normal, or rather the way it always should have been. Stacy, of course, was relieved. She kept her room with its private bathroom and lock, and I reassured her that no matter what happened, this house would always be hers and I'd do everything to make sure no one ever disrupted her peace again. To celebrate the end of all the stress, I decided to treat her to something special. We went to the mall intending to pick up a small gift, but she ended up leaving with a brand new phone, imported sneakers, and a designer handbag that cost nearly $1,000. To me, it was just compensation for the discomfort Alice had caused. "You're the best, Dad," she said, beaming, and that's all that mattered to me. As time passed, we settled into our usual rhythm. Stacy continued working on her art videos and voiceovers in her project studio. Since she needed peace and quiet, I created a new rule. I could only work from my office until a certain time of day to avoid disturbing her creativity. If I needed to do anything afterward, I'd use headphones to ensure she wasn't bothered. She didn't have to do any household chores either. The housekeeper, who came twice a week, took care of everything, including Stacy's laundry. I once suggested that maybe Stacy should learn basic skills like cooking, but she laughed and rolled her eyes. "That's why you have a house, Dad," she said playfully. I found her wit amusing. She's just so clever. I didn't want her to worry about trivial things like doing dishes or sweeping floors. Since we were used to going out together, dining at restaurants became a habit. She always picked expensive places, but I didn't mind. Her happiness was my priority. One time, a waiter corrected her when she ordered something not on the menu. Stacy was furious, and when I saw how upset she was, I immediately called the manager and demanded an apology. The proud smile she gave me afterward was worth every penny of the outrageous tip I left. Things became a bit more complicated when Stacy turned 17 and got her driver's license. I gave her her late mother's old car as promised, but within a month she complained that it was outdated and didn't fit her style. I thought it was only fair to buy her a new one. We picked out a brand new SUV, fully loaded, and she promised she'd use it to commute to college and visit me often. Of course, it quickly became her party vehicle, but I let it slide. She's a teenager, after all. What matters is that she's safe. With her newfound freedom, expenses naturally increased. She insisted she needed new outfits for every event, high-quality makeup, and accessories. The $100 weekly allowance turned into $200, then eventually $300. I know it sounds like a lot, but she's my only daughter and I want her to have everything I didn't. Besides, she's responsible. She uses my credit card only for emergencies, though for her, an emergency might mean a new dress or concert tickets with friends. Stacy also began inviting her friends over more frequently, which I welcomed. I wanted her to feel comfortable at home and enjoy her life. I even allowed her to use my office for private parties as long as she told me in advance. Once, I had to cancel an important meeting because she needed the space to film a project with her friends. I didn't mind. Work can wait, but moments with my daughter are precious. As time went on, she started hinting at wanting to travel abroad alone. At first, I thought it was too soon, but after some convincing, I funded a trip to Europe for her and two of her friends. It was expensive but worth it. Stacy came back seemingly more mature, or at least I convinced myself of that. After the trip, she mentioned wanting to live on her own. It was a bittersweet moment. The thought of her leaving gave me a lump in my throat, but I knew I had to support her. I even offered to buy her an apartment, but she laughed and said she wasn't ready to be away from me just yet. Honestly, I was relieved. She's still my little girl. With Alice out of the picture, some family members started voicing their concerns. My sister told me I was spoiling Stacy, and a few friends suggested I needed to set stricter boundaries. I thought their opinions were ridiculous. I wasn't spoiling my daughter. I was just being a good father. They didn't understand the special bond we shared. Alice, on the other hand, kept trying to maintain contact because of our baby. Every conversation turned into a fight about Stacy. Alice claimed Stacy was manipulating me to keep control. When she suggested that Stacy was acting out of jealousy, I shut down the conversation. Last week, Alice messaged me to say our daughter had been born and asked for financial help as she was struggling. I agreed to pay child support, but I made it clear that was all I'd provide. Stacy's well-being comes first, and I can't let anything compromise her stability. While having dinner at an upscale restaurant recently, Stacy mentioned she wanted to start her own clothing line and needed an initial investment. Without hesitation, I transferred a large sum to her and promised I'd always support her dreams. She gave me that proud smile again and said, "I knew you'd help. I'm everything to you, right?" And she was. No sacrifice was too great when it came to my daughter. The baby was born a few weeks ago. Alice sent me a short message with the name and weight. I offered to take full custody, saying I could provide a more stable home, but she refused. Instead, she demanded child support and made it clear she didn't want me involved in our daughter's life beyond financial support. It hurt deeply, but I agreed. There wasn't much else I could do. Stacy was still my priority, and I kept telling myself this was for the best. But things with Stacy started to shift. She had begun dating a boy named Tyler. At first, I thought it was just a typical teenage relationship, but soon Tyler became a permanent presence in our house. He slept over almost every night, left his things lying around, and acted as though he already lived there. And Stacy, she changed too. The decisions around the house seemed to be slipping out of my hands and into hers. At first, I thought it was just a phase. I let the small things slide. The unannounced parties, the times they took over the living room, and even the way she ignored me when I asked her to help with house chores. "Dad, relax," she'd say. "That's what you have the maid for." I laughed it off back then, not realizing where this was heading. Everything came crashing down one night when I came home from work exhausted, only to find my belongings packed in garbage bags by the front door. "Dad, Tyler is moving in. You need to find somewhere else to stay," Stacy said casually, as if she were discussing the weather. I stood frozen, struggling to process what she had just said. "What? Stacy, this is my house," I protested. She crossed her arms and gave me a cold, defiant look. "No, Dad. You told me this is my house. You promised I could stay here forever. Well, now I'm making the decisions." A knot formed in my throat and my heart sank. I couldn't believe what was happening. The daughter I had sacrificed everything for was now kicking me out of my own home. "You can't just throw me out," I exclaimed, still hoping I could reason with her. "Tyler doesn't feel comfortable with you here, and honestly, neither do I. But you'll figure something out. It's not like you're homeless." I stood there stunned, realizing I had lost all control. Stacy held the power now, and there was nothing I could say to change her mind. Swallowing my pride, I called Alice. I thought maybe for the baby's sake, she'd let me stay temporarily. When she opened the door, her expression was filled with contempt. "So you finally decided to show up?" I explained the situation, trying to stay calm. I told her I needed a place to stay until I sorted things out with Stacy. Alice let out a bitter laugh. "You're pathetic. You let your daughter walk all over you, and now you think you can come here." I tried to reason with her, saying I wanted to be closer to the baby and that I regretted how things had turned out, but Alice wasn't having it. "I don't want you here. You made your choice when you put Stacy above everything else. Now you have to live with the consequences." Her words hit like a slap in the face. There was no pity, No forgiveness, just cold rejection. I left her doorstep with whatever dignity I had left and returned to Stacy's house. When I knocked on the door, Stacy opened it with an annoyed look. "You can stay on the couch for now, but the master bedroom is mine." "Oh, and your bed too." The anger boiled inside me, but I swallowed it. I had no other options. Defeated, I dragged myself to the couch and tried to get comfortable, but no matter how much I shifted, sleep wouldn't come. The house that I had worked so hard to pay off felt foreign. I was nothing more than an unwanted guest in my own home. The next few days were miserable. Tyler acted like he owned the place, and Stacy made it clear that my presence was tolerated at best. Every suggestion I made was met with eye rolls or sarcastic remarks. I tried to fit in, but the message was clear. I no longer belonged here. Meanwhile, Alice only contacted me when it was time to collect child support. Her messages were short and cold. Each notification on my phone reminded me of how far I'd fallen. I couldn't bring myself to admit my mistakes. Instead, I blamed Alice. If she hadn't come into my life and disrupted everything, none of this would have happened. Stacy wouldn't have changed. This is all Alice's fault, I thought, clinging to that belief because the alternative was too painful to accept. One night, as I lay on the couch listening to Stacy and Tyler laughing in what used to be my bedroom, the weight of everything crashed down on me. I closed my eyes, overwhelmed by a sense of loss I couldn't escape. I had given Stacy everything, sacrificed my happiness, my future, and even my dignity, and now I had nothing left. But instead of facing the truth that I had spoiled her and enabled this, I buried the blame deep inside and aimed it at Alice. If she hadn't complicated things, I'd still have my home, my daughter, and my life. It was easier to hate Alice than to admit I had failed. As I lay on the cold, cramped couch, I realized that Stacy had taken everything from me. But the most painful part wasn't losing the house or the bed. It was realizing that the person I had sacrificed everything for no longer cared if I stayed or left. The night after Stacy and Tyler left, I lay awake on the cold couch feeling everything I had lost. But as morning came, I realized something else. I wasn't done yet. It was time to take back what was mine. No more regrets. No more letting others control my life. That afternoon, I waited until Stacy and Tyler went out. As soon as they were gone, I got to work. I moved all of Stacy's things, her clothes, makeup, everything, into the garage. Tyler's junk followed, tossed out like it belonged in the trash. I changed the locks on the front door and reset the security system, ensuring they wouldn't be able to walk back in. I called the cleaning service and told them to clear out anything else left behind. When Stacy returned later that day, she found the door locked. She pounded on it, furious, as I opened it just a crack. "Dad, what the hell is this?" she shouted, Tyler standing behind her with his usual smug expression. "This is me taking my house back," I said, calm but firm. "You're not welcome here anymore." Her mouth fell open, disbelief spreading across her face. "You can't do this to me." "I can and I have," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "Your things are in the garage. It's time for you and Tyler to move on." She tried to argue, tears welling in her eyes, but I stood my ground. Tyler gave me a threatening glare, but I didn't flinch. This conversation was over. After more shouting and slammed car doors, they finally left, leaving me alone in the silence of my reclaimed home. The weight on my chest lifted, replaced by a quiet, unfamiliar sense of relief. It had been painful, but it was necessary. I sat down in the empty living room, taking in the peace I hadn't felt in months. For the first time, I felt like the man I should have been all along, someone who made decisions for himself. I picked up my phone and sent a message to Alice without thinking too much about it. "You were right all along. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I wanted you to know I took a stand. Stacy and Tyler are gone." I set the phone down, not expecting a response. This wasn't about winning Alice back. It was about moving forward. Finally, I had taken control of my life, and that mattered more than anything. The next morning, as I drank my coffee, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Alice standing there. She looked different, lighter, almost at peace. Without saying a word, she stepped inside and we sat down at the kitchen table. "So you finally took a stand," she said with a small smile. "It took a while, but I did," I admitted, trying not to let my voice falter. "I know I messed everything up, and I'm not expecting you to forgive me." Alice shook her head gently. "I'm not here to get back together." I nodded. I had known that was the truth. "But I'm glad you did the right thing," she added. "For yourself. Now you can start over." We talked for a long time, not about the past, but about what lay ahead. She told me about the baby, her plans, and we shared a rare, calm conversation. No fights, no accusations. For the first time in a long while, we found peace in each other's company. Alice seemed content knowing I had finally chosen to take control of my life. As she stood to leave, there were no promises of reconciliation, no offers of second chances. Strangely, I was okay with that. She smiled as she reached the door. "Take care of yourself, for real this time." I closed the door behind her, feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time: peace. The house was quiet, but it didn't feel empty. It felt like a blank slate, a chance to rebuild, to start over with a different mindset. As I moved through the house, opening windows to let in the fresh air, I felt grateful. Grateful for finally facing my mistakes, for letting Stacy go, and for understanding that starting over wasn't an end. It was a beginning. Now on to the next story. Story 6. My name's Jake. I'm 28. And until last year, I genuinely believed I had my life figured out. I had a good job in logistics, a modest but cozy apartment just outside of Austin. And after nearly 4 years together, I thought I was finally ready to take the next step with my girlfriend Dana. She was a little younger, 25, but mature, driven, and with the spark that could light up a room. We met at a mutual friend's New Year's party, and after a month of back-and-forth messages and low-stakes coffee dates, we just clicked. It wasn't fireworks at first, more like one of those old fireplaces. You keep feeding it and tending to it until suddenly it's the only source of warmth in the room. The first year with Dana was magic. She was attentive, curious, always pushing me to open up emotionally, something I was never very good at. I'd come home from a 12-hour shift and she'd have takeout on the couch and some obscure documentary queued up just because she knew I liked learning random stuff. I think part of me ignored the small things, the passive-aggressive jokes about my job not being ambitious enough, or how she never wanted to introduce me to her friends, claiming they were judgmental and too into their own drama. But love makes you overlook a lot. When you're too rolled around, Dana lost her job at the architecture firm she'd interned at. Downsizing, they said. She was devastated, and I did what any partner would do. I picked up more shifts, encouraged her to take time, offered to cover her half of the rent until she figured out her next move. She took it hard, said she felt like a failure, like she wasn't contributing. I kept reminding her that it was just a season and we'd get through it together. But then the season dragged into a year and things shifted. She started spending more time at home, but not in a cozy domestic way. More like she was slowly withdrawing into herself. Always on her phone, always texting someone with this weird, secretive smile. She'd sleep in until noon, claim she was job hunting, then disappear for hours to clear her head. I tried not to pry again. I trusted her. I really did. I figured people process things differently and maybe she just needed space. Meanwhile, I was working overtime, sometimes back-to-back night shifts, trying to keep us afloat. I had this dream of taking her to Santorini. She'd always talk about how Greece was her dream destination. I even remembered her saying once while we were watching a travel vlog, "I want to swim in those blue waters before I turn 30. So I started saving in secret. Every bonus, every little raise, I put it into a travel fund. I called it Operation Santorini in the Notes app. Now, here's where things start to slide into the surreal. One Thursday afternoon, I got sent home early from work. A shipment got delayed, so they told us to pack up and take the rest of the day off. I figured I'd finally surprise Dana with the tickets. I booked them 2 weeks earlier and had been dying to see her reaction. I stopped by our favorite bakery, grabbed her favorite blueberry scone, and even picked up a little envelope from the stationery store to make the big reveal feel special. I remember humming on the way up the stairs to our apartment. The kind of dumb little tune you only hum when you feel like life is finally going right. I unlocked the door quietly, thinking it would be cute to sneak in and catch her off guard. The second I stepped inside, I froze. Her voice was coming from the bedroom, just faint enough that I couldn't make out the words. I thought maybe she was on the phone. I walked toward the hallway, holding the envelope behind my back like a fool. Then I heard it, her voice laughing. He's just a safety net. Once I'm stable, I'm gone. I mean, come on. Logistics. He's sweet, but he's not going anywhere. I stopped breathing. The words punched the air out of my chest like I'd been tackled. I stood there paralyzed, listening to her continue like she was discussing a subscription she planned to cancel. Yeah, he works hard. I'll give him that, but I don't want to be stuck in this small life forever. I need more real success, real people, not just stability. My hand tightened around the envelope so hard it crumpled slightly at the edges. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just backed up, turned around, and walked into the kitchen in a daze. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I pulled out the little envelope, placed it neatly on the kitchen table with the tickets, and a note that simply read, "You almost had it." Then I left quietly, locked the door behind me, and drove. I didn't know where I was going at first. I just needed to be anywhere else. I ended up crashing at my buddy Marcus's place. I told him just enough to explain the look on my face, and he offered me his spare room, no questions asked. I spent the night staring at the ceiling, the words looping in my head like a song I hated. He's just a safety net. Over the next few days, I shut down completely. No calls, no texts. I blocked Dana on everything. I didn't want to hear her voice. Didn't want to risk her justifying it, twisting it, doing what she was so good at, manipulating the narrative. I didn't go home. I didn't even pack. I left everything. Our shared furniture, the apartment I'd spent 3 years building a life in. Figured she could have it. For a week, it was silent. Then came the voicemails. First one, soft, fake, confused. "Hey, where are you? I just saw the envelope. I'm so confused. Can we talk?" Then came the panic. "Jake, this isn't funny. What is going on? Why would you leave like that?" Then came the tears. Night after night. "Please come home. I'm sorry. I was just venting to a friend. You know, I didn't mean it like that." 7 weeks, every night, like clockwork. And the more she begged, the more I started wondering. Was she sorry for what she said? Or just sorry I heard it? But here's where the plot thickens and where the real drama starts. I wish this story was just about heartbreak and moving on. But no, that would have been too easy, because just when I thought I could put Dana in my rear view, her family decided to get involved. And that's where things took a turn from tragic to absolutely unhinged. It started with a Facebook message from her mother. A long one, rambling, half passive-aggressive, half guilt-trippy. She said things like, "I thought you were a real man and you don't abandon someone just because they make one mistake." She implied I owed Dana closure. That leaving was the real betrayal. I didn't respond. So then her sister reached out. Same story, different flavor. This one was more smug, like I was the one who had failed them somehow. "She's been crying for days. I hope you're proud of yourself." Like I wasn't the one picking up the pieces of a broken illusion. Like I hadn't spent months planning a once-in-a-lifetime trip for someone who only saw me as a stepping stone. But then it got personal. Her dad, who I'd barely spoken to during the entire relationship, left a voicemail on my work line. My work line, demanding I man up and stop playing games with his daughter's heart. That voicemail changed everything, because that's when I realized they didn't just want me to come back. They expected me to. Like it was my duty to forgive and forget, to return to my place on the shelf as the reliable, convenient, harmless boyfriend. The safety net. And that's when the idea hit me. If they wanted drama, I'd give them drama, but on my terms. I wasn't going to yell or throw things or air out her dirty laundry online. No. I was going to show them exactly who they underestimated. But before I get to that part, before the wheels of revenge even start turning, something happened that made it personal in a way I never expected. Something involving my younger sister, Emily, who'd always looked up to Dana and had just moved back home after college. And that's where things really start to unravel. Emily was 22, fresh out of college, and still had that wide-eyed optimism that the world hadn't beaten out of her yet. She had just moved back into town that summer and was crashing with our parents while she figured things out. I hadn't told her much about what happened between me and Dana, just that we broke up and that I didn't want to talk about it. Emily was always close to Dana in a weird little sister, cool girl worship sort of way. Dana used to give her makeup tips, helped her write a cover letter once, even took her to get her first cocktail when she turned 21. I think Emily saw her as more than just my girlfriend. She was like the older sister she never had. So, you can imagine my surprise when Emily showed up at Marcus's place on a Tuesday evening, looking pale and shaken, holding her phone like it had personally betrayed her. "I think you need to see this," she said, barely getting the words out. She handed me her phone and my stomach turned before I even looked. There it was, an Instagram story. Dana's story posted just a few hours earlier. It was a photo of her and some guy I'd never seen before. They were out at a rooftop bar downtown, all dressed up, champagne in hand. She had that same sly smile she used to give me when she knew she was pushing boundaries. The caption, "Upgrade season. No more dead weight." That's when I knew the voicemails weren't about love. They were about image. Dana had been keeping up the poor me. He left me routine because she didn't want to be seen as the one who got dumped. She wanted to spin the story, twist the narrative so she was still the protagonist. And now that enough time had passed, she could publicly flaunt her new life while pretending she'd been the victim all along. Emily sat across from me, waiting for me to say something. I didn't. I was too focused on keeping my hands from shaking. She leaned in a little and said, "Jake, there's more." And what she told me next made my skin go cold. Apparently, Dana had reached out to her a week earlier under the guise of missing the family. She told Emily she was worried about me, said I'd been acting erratic, that I was shutting people out, and that she was concerned I might do something stupid. It wasn't just manipulation. It was a setup. She was planting the seeds to make me look unstable. So, if I ever told anyone the truth, if I ever aired what she said that day in the bedroom, she can spin it like I was delusional, that I misunderstood, that I'd heard what I wanted to hear. And that's when the anger settled in. The cold, calculated kind. The kind that sits quietly in your chest, not yelling, not crying, just waiting. Dana didn't want closure. She wanted control. And now she was trying to manipulate my sister, the one person in my family who'd still defended her. That wasn't just low. That was war. So I started making plans. First, I pulled all the messages, voicemails, and screenshots I'd saved. Every, "I'm sorry," every, "please come back," every video message where she was sobbing about how she'd made a mistake. I cataloged them. I made backups. I even recorded myself telling the story from start to finish. Dates, receipts, everything just in case. Not for revenge yet, for protection. Dana was the kind of person who could burn down your life with a single well-placed rumor. Then I contacted our old landlord and arranged to end the lease early. The unit was already due for a renewal in a few weeks, and with my name still on it, I had the power to walk away. I didn't want anything from that apartment. I just wanted my name off it before Dana started digging her claws in legally. She didn't take that well. The text came in fast, panicked, furious. "You're ruining my life. You can't just leave me homeless. You're being vindictive and immature." And that's when I knew her fallback plan was gone. She'd burned her bridge too early. She had a new guy, sure, but she thought I'd still be there in the background, that I'd still be her safety net in case things didn't work out. She underestimated me. Then the final straw landed like a boulder. Emily called me again, this time late at night. She sounded shaken. "Jake, Mom just called. Dana showed up at the house." "What?" I sat up in bed, immediately wide awake. "She said she was there to return something of yours," Emily said. "But she wasn't carrying anything. She talked to Mom for over an hour. About you." Apparently, Dana had told my mom that she was worried I was isolating myself, that I'd been acting paranoid and unstable. She played the concerned ex perfectly. She even cried. "I think she's trying to get ahead of something," Emily said. "Like, if you say anything, She wants people to already think you're unreliable. It was genius. Evil, but genius. Dana had realized I was slipping out of her control. So, now she was laying the groundwork to discredit me before I could expose her. And that's when something in me snapped. It was no longer about heartbreak. It was about justice, about truth. This wasn't just a messy breakup. This was calculated character assassination. And if she wanted to play that game, then fine. But I wasn't going to shout. I wasn't going to fight. I was going to outmaneuver her. So I started building my plan. Not petty revenge, not public drama, but something much more satisfying. And the first piece of the puzzle, a wedding. But not mine, her sister's. And Dana had no idea what was coming. The wedding was set for early November, just under 3 months away. Dana's sister, Hannah, was marrying some tech guy from Dallas, the kind who wore loafers without socks and used the word synergy unironically. I'd met him once during the early days of my relationship with Dana, and I remember him asking me if logistics was like a warehouse thing or more like Amazon drones. I didn't bother explaining. Hannah and I weren't close, but we were civil. She always struck me as more grounded than Dana, more practical. But there was this thin layer of superiority she carried around, the kind you only notice when you've been around it long enough. She'd roll her eyes at Dana behind her back, then hug her too long in front of others. Classic sibling competition, dressed up in Instagram smiles. Now, here's where things get interesting. About a year ago, before everything went downhill, Dana had volunteered me to help with some of the wedding logistics. Booking the guest shuttle, sorting out seating arrangements, and even managing a shared spreadsheet of RSVPs. I wasn't thrilled, but I agreed at the time. You do stuff for your partner's family, especially when you think you're building a future with them. But Dana never told Hannah that I stopped being part of the planning when we broke up. My name was still on the shared Google Drive folder, still on the group emails, still marked as the point of contact for a few vendors. So when I logged into that folder again for the first time in months, everything was still wide open. And that's when I found something. A notes document, Hannah's personal breakdown of table placements and VIP seating, which included commentary. I'm talking brutal little notes like, Uncle Marvin, only invite if Dad insists, drinks too much, smells like salami. Becca, cousin, sits alone unless someone volunteers to take one for the team. And my personal favorite, Dana, separate from Jake if they're still together. If not, put her next to Tyler. So not only did Hannah not know Dana and I had broken up, she'd planned for the eventuality that we might. I stared at that sentence, if they're still together, and I realized something. Dana hadn't just kept the breakup quiet out of embarrassment. She wanted to show up with someone else and pretend she had moved on. She wanted to steal the attention, make it look like she was the one thriving. That's why she was posting those rooftop bar photos. That's why she was cozying up to my family. She was laying the groundwork for a performance. And now I had the stage. But I wasn't interested in stealing the spotlight. I was interested in controlling who held the mic. So I waited. I watched. Over the next few weeks, I stayed quiet while Dana kept trying to reassert control. Messages to Emily, cryptic posts about healing and new beginnings, and even a not-so-subtle subtweet about men who can't handle strong women. And then I made my move. I called Hannah. Hey, it's Jake, I said as casually as I could. I know it's been a while. Dana and I, well, we're not together anymore. Didn't want to cause any confusion for the wedding. There was a pause. Oh, she said. Well, she didn't mention that. I figured, I said. But I also figured you might want a heads up, especially since I'm still getting the RSVP emails and a few of the vendors still have my number. She let out an awkward little laugh. Oh, right. I should probably fix that. Then I dropped the bait. By the way, do you know if she's bringing anyone? Another pause. I don't think so. Why? No reason. Just didn't want to make things weird for your big day. I won't even show up if you'd rather keep things smooth. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, actually, would you mind coming for a bit just for the ceremony? You helped with so much early on. It would be weird not to see you there. Hook, line, sinker. I agreed graciously, told her I wouldn't make a scene, that I was just there to support. But behind the scenes, I started planning something a little more theatrical. Not malicious, just clarifying. First, I reached out to a friend of mine, Sophie. We dated briefly back in college, but we stayed good friends. She's smart, funny, and the kind of woman who can walk into a room and instantly raise the average IQ by 10 points. I explained everything. Dana, the breakup, the manipulation, the wedding. She didn't even hesitate. "So, you want me to play the graceful new woman in your life?" she said, sipping her coffee. "While your ex implodes trying to figure out how she lost the safety net?" "Exactly," she smiled. "I'll need a dress." Now, I wasn't planning some petty public showdown. I wasn't going to make a toast or steal the bride's thunder or anything crazy, but I knew Dana. I knew she hated being upstaged, especially by women who made her feel inferior. Sophie, with her easy charm and quiet confidence, was everything Dana pretended to be online. And the best part, she didn't need to say a word. All she had to do was exist. But then something happened that nearly blew the whole thing up. A week before the wedding, I got a message from an unknown number. "I know what you're planning." I stared at it for a long minute. Then another came through. "You think you're clever, but you're not the only one who knows how to play games." There was no name, no photo, but I didn't need one. It was Dana. She'd found out somehow. And if I wasn't careful, she could still flip the script. Turn the whole thing into a toxic ex-narrative. Tell everyone I was stalking her, harassing her, trying to ruin her sister's big day. That message changed everything. Because now the wedding wasn't just an opportunity. It was a battlefield. The days leading up to the wedding were tight. Every move had to be calculated. I wasn't just playing 4D chess with a woman who had mastered the art of manipulation. I was also walking into a social minefield where one wrong step could make me look like the bitter ex who couldn't let go. Sophie was all in. She handled everything with this easy grace that made her seem untouchable. She picked a deep emerald green dress that made her look like she'd walked off a Vogue shoot. Elegant, not attention-seeking. The perfect mix of classy and effortless. She even suggested we tone down the affection. "You don't want to look like you're trying too hard," she said. "Just let her spiral." I'd never loved to plan more. The wedding day arrived. Sunny, annoyingly perfect, the kind of day Instagram lives for. It was held at a renovated vineyard about an hour outside of Austin. Big white tents, fairy lights, champagne towers, the works. I walked in with Sophie right as the pre-ceremony mingling started. Heads turned. A few people recognized me. Some looked confused. Some looked curious. And then I saw her. Dana. She froze when she saw me, like someone had pressed pause on her entire face. Her smile died mid-sentence. Her wine glass tilted slightly in her hand. And when she finally registered Sophie next to me, her eyes narrowed just a bit, just enough for me to catch it. I gave her a small, polite nod. No drama, no smugness, just acknowledgement, like she was any other guest. Then I moved on. Sophie and I didn't cling to each other all night. We mingled. We talked to people. We danced once or twice. But I made sure not to hover near Dana. I wanted her to feel my presence but not be able to touch it. She tried to approach me once during the cocktail hour. Came up with that practiced little smile she always used when she wanted to control the tone of a conversation. "Jake," she said too brightly. "Well, you look well." I smiled. "Thanks. You too." "Sophie, this is Dana." Sophie gave a soft, effortless smile. "Nice to meet you." Dana blinked. "You too? How do you two know each other?" "College," Sophie said, sipping her champagne. He was quieter back then. Less impressive jawline. I laughed just once. It was subtle, but Dana's jaw twitched. There was a beat of silence, and then Dana tilted her head. "Well, I guess we both moved on." Sophie raised her glass slightly, hopefully in the right direction. That ended the conversation. The ceremony went smoothly. The bride cried. The groom fumbled the vows. People clapped. I watched from the third row with Sophie beside me, calm as a monk. But the real payoff came later during the reception. Dana had clearly planned to make her re-entrance in a second dress. It was a sparkly silver number. Flashy, loud, designed for attention. She strutted in with that same rooftop bar energy, expecting the spotlight. But no one cared, because in the time she was off changing, Sophie had somehow charmed every table we'd passed. She'd helped an older woman with her corsage, told a few witty stories, complimented Hannah's dress in such a sincere way that the bride insisted on getting a photo with her. My ex was being upstaged without me even lifting a finger. Dana tried again. She approached my sister Emily, who was talking to Sophie by the dessert table. I caught the tail end of the exchange as I approached from behind. "So, you're really hanging out with him now?" Dana said, arms folded. "After everything?" Emily didn't flinch. "After what, Dana? After you used him until you thought you could trade up." Sophie smiled politely. "It's fine, Emily. Some people just confuse ambition with stepping on everyone who loves them." Dana's face flushed red. "You don't know anything about me." "Oh, I know enough," Sophie said. "More importantly, he does." Dana turned to me then, desperate to regain some kind of control. "I didn't mean what I said that day. You know that, right? I was just venting. I was frustrated." "You were." I held up a hand. "Calm, quiet. I heard exactly what you meant, Dana. And you're right. I was your safety net. But you should have asked yourself one thing before you cut the rope." She looked confused. I leaned in just slightly. "What happens when you fall and there's no one left to catch you?" Her eyes watered just a bit, but I wasn't moved. Not anymore. I turned, offered Sophie my arm, and walked away. We didn't look back. The next morning, I woke up to 4 new voicemails from Dana. They went from apologetic to angry to desperate. I deleted them all. Then I blocked her number for good. Emily texted me later that day. She left the wedding early. No one really noticed. That was the final nail. I didn't need to burn Dana's world down. I just needed to let her light the match and step out of the way. And that's exactly what I did. Now on to the next story. Story 7. Your mother doesn't want you to come to her birthday. Grow up, Dad said coldly. Only the real family will be here, not you. I got angry and said, fine. I'll just return the gift to the car dealership. My dad turned pale. My mom yelled at him, why did you do that? But I left. 2 days ago, I received an invitation for birthday. Dear son, please come. So today I went there announced. I canceled everything. It started 2 weeks ago when I thought I could finally do something meaningful. I've always been the odd one out in my family. My sisters, straight A students, perfect jobs, families right out of a catalog. Me, I've spent most of my life feeling like an afterthought. I thought maybe this year I could change that. I saved up, worked extra hours, and bought a brand new Lexus for my mom's birthday. No used car, no good enough. Brand new, customized exactly the way I knew she'd like it. I even scheduled the delivery to coincide with her birthday party. I was excited as I drove over to her house to discuss the logistics. It wasn't going to be a surprise delivery. I wanted to set it up right, make it memorable. I knocked on the door, dealer paperwork in hand. Dad answered. He didn't say hello. No smile. No, hey, nice to see you. He just stood there blocking the doorway. Then he said it, cold as hell. Your mom doesn't want you to come to her birthday party. Grow up. Only real family will be there and you won't be there. At first I thought he was joking. It didn't make any sense. But then I saw her mom standing behind him in the hallway watching. She didn't speak. She didn't even flinch. She just nodded when Dad said it like she couldn't agree fast enough. I can't even describe how that felt. Like I was a stranger who had walked up to her door. I felt this wave of anger. And before I could stop myself, I said, fine, I'll just return the gift to the car dealership. And turned around. I caught Dad's face as I said it. He went pale as if a light bulb had gone out inside him. Mom suddenly started yelling at him, but I didn't stay to listen. I got in my car, slammed the door, and drove away. The next 2 weeks were a circus. My sisters texted me constantly telling me to be the bigger person. That Mom didn't mean it. That it's just stress from planning the party. Dad sent me a half-hearted message about how family forgives and how he hoped I was not still upset. Mom? Radio silence. Not even a damn emoji. I didn't respond to any of them. I didn't argue. I just quietly walked back to the dealership and canceled the order. Fortunately, the salesman was cool and let me out of most of the contract. The Lexus was probably on a truck headed somewhere else by the time I left the lot. No one in my family knew. They were still acting like everything was fine, that I'd show up smiling as if nothing had happened. Then this morning, 2 days before her birthday, I get a text from Mom. Just 3 words. "Dear son, please come." No apology, no explanation, no nothing. As if the past 2 weeks didn't exist. I almost didn't go. I should have listened to that instinct, but something inside me wanted to go through with it. I picked up a cheap bouquet at a gas station along the way. Nothing fancy. I wasn't going to spend another $1,000 to make myself look like an idiot. By the time I got to the restaurant, the party was in full swing. A big table by the window decorated with balloons and banners. There they all were. Mom, Dad, my sisters, their husbands, random family friends, even cousins I hadn't seen in years. I stood there for a second just watching them. They were laughing. They were toasting. They looked like a perfect family portrait. No one even noticed me right away. I walked up to the table holding the wilted flowers like a bad joke. Mom finally saw me and gave that tight little smile you give when your least favorite coworker shows up at your wedding. I didn't sit down. I didn't even pretend to be polite. I just said it plain as day. I canceled everything. Forks hit plates. Glasses clinked awkwardly. Half the table froze. The other half looked confused. Dad's face turned a strange shade of purple. My sister stared at me as if I had just peed on their birthday cake. And that's when it all started to unravel. For a second after I said it, no one moved. It was as if I had thrown a live grenade on the table and everyone was waiting to see if it would explode. Dad squinted at me as if he hadn't heard correctly. He slowly put down his fork, wiped his mouth with his napkin, and said very quietly, "What did you just say?" I didn't flinch. I was done playing their games. "The car," I said loud enough for the people at the next table to probably hear. "The Lexus. I canceled it. It's not coming. It's not yours." Mom let out this sharp little gasp like someone had just punched the air out of her. One of my cousins, the one who's always posting fake perfect family photos online, actually spilled her drink. Dad stood up so quickly that his chair scraped the floor with that god-awful screech. He pointed his finger right at me. "You selfish little," he started, but he didn't even finish the sentence. He was too angry to find the words. Then Mom jumped in, clutching her pearls. Literally, she was wearing a pearl necklace like a cartoon character, and said how she would have been mortified to accept something so extravagant. How it would have drawn too much attention to her. Poor thing, right? That's why she nodded like a bobblehead 2 weeks ago when Dad told me not to come. Sure, Mom. I could see people at other tables starting to look over. A couple of servers behind the counter pretended not to watch. But they were. Then my sister Lindsay had to open her mouth. She flipped her hair back and looked at the cheap flowers in my hand like they were covered in something disgusting. "Gas station flowers," she said loud and clear. "Real classy, Nathan." I smiled. Couldn't help it. It wasn't even a sad smile. It was the kind of smile you get when you realize that the movie you thought was a drama is actually a comedy. I leaned forward slightly, just enough so that each and every one of them could hear me without yelling. "You think that's all I canceled?" Dad's face tightened like he was bracing for a punch. Mom froze, holding her napkin in the air. "I canceled the catering for Christmas," I said. "Good luck cooking a turkey for 20 people by yourself." You could almost hear the mental math going on around the table. "I canceled the vacation rental you were all planning for next summer. You can find a hotel or maybe just camp." Dad took a step toward me as if he were going to say something or do something, but I continued. "And the family reunion, the big one you all brag about every year. Yeah. I canceled the deposit. No reunion." The whole table exploded at once. My younger sister, Becky, started crying about how she'd already bought outfits for her kids. Lindsay accused me of being spiteful and petty in front of her new fiancé, who looked like he was desperately looking for a way out. Dad started yelling that he trusted me to take care of these things, that a real man doesn't walk away from his family. Mom just sat there dabbing her eyes with a napkin like a tragic actress from a 50s soap opera. I didn't argue. I didn't yell back. I pulled my phone out of my pocket, tapped it a few times, and pulled up screenshots of every single cancellation confirmation. I held them up for them to see, and then I put the phone back in my jacket pocket. They could have it all, the ruin, the embarrassment, the wreckage of their perfect day. I placed the sad little bouquet in the middle of the table, right on top of a plate of half-eaten salad. Petals scattered everywhere. "Happy birthday, Mom," I said, and then I turned and walked out, not looking back, just pushing the door open so hard it banged against the latch. The cold air hit me like a slap, but it felt good, clean. I could still hear the muffled yelling from inside as I crossed the parking lot. I'm sitting here now, engine idling, hands still shaking a little, wondering how the hell it took me so long to finally burn it all down. Feels insane. Feels unbelievable. And honestly, I think I'm just getting started. Update 1. It's the next night now. I'm home finally feeling like I can breathe again. Yesterday still feels like it happened in slow motion. After I left the restaurant, I didn't go straight home. I drove around for a while with no real destination, just letting the roads take me wherever. I ended up at some random overlook outside of town and sat there for hours just staring at the city lights and thinking about everything. The crazy thing is that was supposed to be the end of it. I did what I had to do. I finally stood up for myself. I thought they'd be pissed. Sure, but I figured they'd just talk behind my back like always and leave me alone. But no, of course not. Around 9 p.m., my phone started blowing up. First, it was texts, long angry paragraphs from my sisters. Some blaming me, some acting like they were the victims. Now, I didn't answer. Then Dad started calling. Straight to voicemail over and over again. After the fourth call, I turned my phone off. When I turned it back on this morning, there were voicemails, too. Angry ones, fake sad ones. One where Mom was crying and said she just didn't know how things got so bad. And then came the kicker, a group text. All of them, Mom, Dad, both sisters, their husbands, in one big family thread that I didn't even know still existed. The message basically boiled down to this. They were disappointed in me. They could not believe that I would humiliate them in front of the whole family. I owe Mom a new birthday present. And if I ever want to be part of this family again, I must apologize. Not a word about what they did. Not a word about how they told me I wasn't welcome in the first place. Not even a half-assed apology. Just straight-up gaslighting. Like it was all my fault in the first place. At first, I felt that familiar pang of guilt. The one I've been trained to feel all my life whenever they're unhappy. But this time, it didn't stick. I spent the rest of the day thinking about it. Really sitting with it. About all the times I bent over backwards for them. About all the birthdays and holidays I paid for when Dad forgot his wallet or Mom didn't feel up to cooking. About all the times I was the one left out of the photos, out of the invitations, out of the plans but expected to pick up the check. I realized something I probably should have figured out a long time ago. I was never part of their real family. Not to them. I was just a tool, a wallet, a punching bag when things didn't go perfectly. Yesterday wasn't about revenge. Not really. It wasn't about making a scene. It wasn't even about the money. It was about finally walking away from a table where I was never really welcome in the first place. And tonight, sitting here in my little apartment, no one yelling at me, no one demanding anything of me, no fake family dinners. It's the calmest I've felt in years. I don't think they get it yet. I don't think they understand that this time I'm really done. But they will. They will soon realize that I'm not coming back. Update 2. It's been a full week since the restaurant meltdown. 7 days. Feels like it's been a lifetime. I thought after I walked out things would slowly die down. Maybe a few angry texts, maybe some awkward family gossip. I was stupid to think that. It started the very next day. Sunday morning, I woke up to 27 missed calls. 27? Most from my dad, some from my sisters. A couple from random numbers I didn't even recognize. When I opened my messages, it was just a flood of guilt trips and threats. Half of them were blaming me for ruining Mom's special day. The other half were practically demanding I fix things immediately. I ignored everything, didn't respond to a single message. And that silence seemed to drive them absolutely insane. Monday afternoon, someone started knocking on my apartment door, like they were trying to break it down. I live in a pretty quiet building, so it felt like the walls were shaking. I peeked through the peephole. Lindsay. She was standing there, arms crossed, foot tapping furiously. I didn't open it. I wasn't about to let her in just to get screamed at. She stayed out there for a good 10 minutes, switching between shouting and pretending to sob. My neighbor down the hall came out to see what the noise was, and Lindsay just waved her hand and said it was a family emergency. Then she taped some crumpled scribbled note to my door and left. The note said I owed Mom a proper birthday. It wasn't even an apology. It was a command. Tuesday, Dad decided to get creative. He sent me a formal email like actual business format. Bolded subject line, bullet points, the whole deal. In it, he said I had until Friday to apologize for my actions or there would be consequences for my abandonment of family obligations. I actually laughed out loud reading it. Like, what was he going to do? Sue me for emotional damages? But it got worse. Wednesday afternoon, the dealership called me. Turns out someone, probably Becky or her husband, had called them pretending to be me. They tried to get the dealership to push through the Lexus delivery anyway and stick me with the bill. The manager smelled the BS right away and called me directly. I had to spend half an hour on the phone confirming my cancellation, filing a fraud report with the dealership just in case, and locking everything down. It was embarrassing and infuriating. I hadn't even thought they'd stoop that low. Thursday, Mom went public. Full Facebook meltdown. She posted this long, sappy essay about losing a child to bitterness and how forgiveness is a duty even when someone wounds you deeply. She didn't tag me, but she didn't need to. Every single person in our extended family knew exactly who she was talking about. Within an hour, my inbox filled up again. Some cousins sent supportive messages. Most sent garbage like, "Family is everything," or, "You'll regret this when it's too late." Some even said stuff like, "You should apologize before your mom gets sick from the stress." No one asked what actually happened. No one cared. Friday morning, I came home from work to find an envelope jammed into my mailbox. No stamp. Someone had hand-delivered it. Inside was a handwritten letter from Mom and Dad, front and back. 2 full pages full of Bible quotes, full of how pride leads to destruction and a family divided cannot stand. Not one line acknowledging what they said to me that day at the door. Not one mention of how they told me I wasn't part of the real family. They honestly believed I should be crawling back, begging for forgiveness because they felt hurt. I spent a long time staring at that letter. I didn't rip it up. I didn't set it on fire. I folded it neatly, put it back in the envelope, and shoved it in the back of my kitchen drawer. I don't need their words poisoning my life anymore. But I'm not pretending it didn't happen either. Today's Saturday again. Full circle. I woke up late, made coffee in silence, sat on my couch, and realized I haven't felt this peaceful in years. No constant anxiety. No waiting for the next insult disguised as a joke. No heavy dread about the next family event where I'll be treated like a prop. They lost their favorite punching bag, their wallet, their scapegoat. They're furious because for the first time, they have to deal with themselves. This past week was the loudest, messiest, most exhausting disaster I've ever seen from them. And somehow, it made me realize something simple. I don't owe anyone a second chance just because we share blood. Update 3. I really thought by now they'd finally give up. This morning started off normal. I was planning to finally have a quiet weekend. I went to the grocery store, got coffee, even picked up a couple things to fix up my apartment. It actually felt good doing normal boring stuff without a storm hanging over me. When I pulled back into my parking spot, I noticed a car I didn't recognize parked a few spaces down. Didn't think much of it, but as soon as I started walking toward my building, I saw 2 people standing by the entrance. It was Mom and Dad. I froze for a second. I honestly thought about just getting back in my car and driving off, but I was tired of running, so I kept walking like I didn't see them. Mom spotted me first and started waving frantically. Dad just stood there with his arms crossed, looking like he was trying to hold back a full-on explosion. They didn't even wait for me to get close before Mom started talking. She said they were here to fix things. That enough was enough. That it was time for me to stop being stubborn and come back where I belong. Dad didn't say much at first, just stared at me like he was daring me to argue. I told them, plain and simple, that I wasn't interested, that it wasn't about being stubborn. It was about not setting myself on fire to keep their party warm anymore. Mom started crying immediately, real dramatic, sobbing into a tissue she definitely brought for this exact performance. She said all the usual garbage about how family sticks together, about how no mistake is too big to forgive. Funny how none of those words existed when they told me I wasn't part of the real family. 2 weeks ago, Dad finally stepped forward and said if I didn't come back into the family, they'd have no choice but to cut me out for good. No more invitations, no more holidays, no more birthdays, complete exile. I almost laughed in his face. Like, what exactly were they threatening me with? They already told me I wasn't family. They already made it clear I was disposable. I told them I was fine with that. Mom went full meltdown mode, shouting in the parking lot now about how I was killing her, how I was breaking the family apart. Neighbors were looking out their windows. Someone walking their dog actually crossed the street to avoid us. Dad's face twisted up, and for a second I thought he might actually hit me. He clenched his fists so tight his knuckles went white. But he didn't. He just spit out something about how I was nothing without family and stormed off toward the car. Mom stayed for a minute longer, sobbing and pleading. I stood there and said nothing. I didn't comfort her. I didn't apologize. I didn't argue. I just let the silence hang heavy between us until she finally realized I wasn't moving. She turned and followed Dad without another word. They drove off. I stood there in the cold for a few more minutes, just breathing, feeling the weight of it all settle. It's over now. I know it is. They tried everything. Guilt, anger, threats, public scenes, and none of it worked. They're not coming back again. And for the first time in my life, either am I. Final update. It's been 2 months now. Sitting here tonight, I can barely believe where things have ended up. At first, after that last scene in the parking lot, I thought it was done for good. I figured they'd pretend I didn't exist and move on with their perfect lives. And for a few weeks, it looked like that's exactly what they did. No calls, no texts, no surprise visits, just silence. And then the real surprises started. First came the letter from my aunt, my mom's older sister. She's always been the black sheep of the extended family, the one everyone whispered about at holidays. I hadn't spoken to her in years. Out of nowhere, she sends me this handwritten letter telling me how proud she was of me, how she knew what it felt like to be the outsider, to be treated like an accessory instead of a person. She said she had cut them off a long time ago for the same reasons. Inside the envelope was a small photo. It was from a birthday party years ago. I was about 12. Everyone else, my parents, my sisters, cousins, were drooped around the cake, laughing. I was standing off to the side, out of the frame, almost completely forgotten. Even then, that letter hit harder than anything else. I realized it wasn't just me. It never had been. Then, maybe 3 weeks after that, I got a call from the dealership. The manager remembered me and said he thought I should know. My dad had tried to buy a new car under my name using old paperwork he had gotten somehow from when I was originally setting up the Lexus. It didn't work. Of course, they caught it immediately and shut it down. But the fact that he tried, it lit a fire under me. I finally pulled all my credit reports, locked everything down, froze my accounts, set alerts on everything. It was a good thing I did, too. Turns out there were a few suspicious activities already that I had missed, stuff they had probably planned to blame on me later. I spent a few nights wondering what the hell kind of people would do that to their own kid. But in the end, it didn't matter. They weren't my people anymore. Then just a few days ago, the final twist. I got an invitation in the mail. A wedding invitation. Lindsay's wedding. The sister who mocked my flowers at the restaurant. Set for next month. Beautiful card. Fancy print. My name was listed, but not as a guest, as a financial sponsor. No, dear Nathan. No, we'd love for you to come. Just a note at the bottom that said, "We hope you'll be generous with your family gift." It was so absurd. I actually laughed out loud alone in my kitchen holding that stupid invitation, laughing like a maniac. I didn't respond. I didn't RSVP. I didn't send a gift. I dropped the invitation straight into the trash, shut off the kitchen light, and went back to living my life. And here's the craziest part. In these 2 months, I've been more at peace than I ever thought possible. I reconnected with a few old friends. I started going to the gym again. I even took a weekend trip to the mountains by myself. No drama, no fake smiles, no walking on eggshells. The world didn't end because I walked away from my family. It actually started. They taught me that blood isn't thicker than self-respect. That being family isn't an automatic free pass to treat someone like garbage. I don't know if I'll ever hear from them again. Honestly, I hope I don't. But if they ever do show up again, knocking on my door with their fake apologies and crocodile tears, they'll find an empty hallway, a locked door, and a life that finally doesn't have a seat for them at the table. We have reached the end. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this, and give us your thoughts about the stories in the comments section. Thank you and see you in the next video.